the right place for a core group meeting?
No, sorry, this is the People and Families Scrutiny Committee. Sorry, do you know what room you're meant to be in?
They said, I'm so sorry to interrupt. They said committee room 1.
Oh.
Core group meeting for a family on from a school.
No, that's not here.
I think everyone was in the Christmas spirit this morning. Apologies for this. Welcome to the meeting of the People and Families Scrutiny Committee. Please note we will be live streaming the meeting on YouTube, and a recording of the meeting will also be available afterwards. We're not expecting a fire alarm today, so if the alarm does sound, please follow the officers out of the building and gather in the cathedral grounds. Well, again, welcome to everybody. Sorry, I'm having slight trouble with mine.
Should I do the apologies?
Yes, yeah.
From Councillor Councillor Jeff Henry is substituting. Also apologies from Councillor June Lumley, Councillor Marie Goldman and Scott Tatum from Health Watch.
Thank you. Minutes of the meeting on the 10th of October. Hopefully you'll get a chance to have a look at those. Any comments on those at all, or should we take those as read? Great. Thank you. I don't think we've got any questions from the public this morning. On with the first item 4 on the and over to you, Eric. I'll give it to you to give your presentation, and then we can ask questions when you're finished, or in between, if you're happy to take questions.
Whichever is fine. If we're going to deal with the topic later in the presentation, we'll probably point to that, but this is more of a conversation than a presentation, so happy to take things as we go along.
Okay, we promise we won't heckle.
That's fine. So whole council transformation. So I'm conscious that, first of all, some people have heard some of these things more than once. Some people may not have heard them at all. But I don't think anybody's going to see the totality of what we've got to talk about today. So we're going to go through this on the basis that there are some people who won't have heard any of this before, but we'll focus quite a bit more on the areas specific to people and families. And I know when we had a pre-meet, Ray, with you, there are a couple of questions that we have for the committee that will help us. We did share quite a bit of background information. We're not intended to go through all those documents. They just very much show the journey of the transformation programme since it was stood up in May 2023, and the first cabinet decision which initiated the first lot of projects about a year ago, actually, wasn't it? About a year ago. And I think the second thing to say is, so transformation is not a new concept for Essex County Council. We've already had 2 phases of transformation, kicking off in earnest in about 2012, where we delivered over £600 million worth of financial savings, which I think is one of the reasons that this council is in a good position from a financial perspective compared to many of its compatriot county councils around the country. In terms of the agenda, so I'll be covering the overview, the vision and the strategy. So why are we doing this? How are we going to do this? And then Debbie will be taking us through the more detail of how we are doing this and the specific projects that relate to this committee. And then say at the end, we have a couple of questions for you, and I'm sure you'll have some for us. Go next slide, please. The next two slides, please. So this transformation, this transformation program, so almost phase 3, really, we see them as a continuum. Transformation has not happened in isolation. It is a continuation. It's a bit like, a dog is not just for Christmas. Transformation is not just for one administrative term. It is a continuous process. But there is something quite different about this phase of transformation, which is compared to the previous two, which I say were primarily focused on saving money, but at the same time improving outcomes where that was possible as part of that. This transformation program is quite different in that we have or we would have had 3 major change programs happening all at the same time in the same space with the same set of resource. Now, one of them would have been focused on delivering the political ambitions set out in Everyone's Essex, a strong, inclusive and sustainable economy, high quality environment, health, well-being and independence for all ages, and a good place for children and family to grow. And that would have been a major change programme in its own right. But alongside that, we would have had a whole change programme aligned to the changing world we live in. So technology is increasing at an exponential rate, and we would need to have a change programme that responded to that. The demographics of the county are changing. If you look at the census, the last census in 2021 and the previous one, we'll see that actually the number of people is significantly increased, the diversity of our population, and we continue to have an accelerating older people demographic in this county, and we know that what that means in terms of the ability to deliver adult social care. We also had the little thing of COVID in 2020, and that has completely changed how we work. So we would have, prior to March 2020, we would have expected if somebody worked full time, they'd be pretty much in the workplace 5 days a week, maybe 4. That hybrid, the online meetings were occasional, but not the norm. And now we've completely changed. People are in their place of work a couple of days a week. Hybrid meetings are commonplace, and so how we work as a council and as a wider society has been completely changed by COVID. In some senses, it accelerated what was happening already with technological changes. So, but it has created, and that has big impacts for our future technology, the type of people that we need to employ in the future, the roles, but also our property. So it won't be of any surprise that there are a large amount of our property, County Hall as an example, you can walk around any day of the week and it feels empty. And if you come here on a Monday or a Friday, it feels even emptier because the working pattern of people coming into the office, and we know this because we've monitored it to help us with our property transformation, is people largely come in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And the third big programme that we could have had is the funding gap. So the difference between what we're expecting to receive as a county council and the ever increasing demands, particularly around adult and social care, and to a lesser extent financially, SEND, for example. And at the time of kicking off the programme, we expected there to be a gap between those two of about £171 million. That's probably grown already closer to 200. Is that correct? Yeah, already close to 200. And with the government talking about redistribution of funding from shire counties to metropolitan areas, that number could be even more significant. And this programme was targeted with saving, and when I say saving, it's reducing run rate, not one-off savings, reducing run rate by £100 million by 29/30. And we've already got line of sight to savings of in the order of about 67 million. So we're well on there, because the aim was always to get ahead of the curve and not to leave savings to the end. So any one of those three programmes of change would have been a significant piece of work in its own right. But as I said, they would all be happening in the same place at the same time, requiring the same resource. And that is why we brought everything together into what we've called whole council transformation, because it is looking at everything in the council. Okay, next slide. So we set out as part of this a vision. What is it we want to be? And we said Essex. Well, our vision is that Essex County Council is ambitious, and by 2030 it will be one of the most forward-looking, effective, and financially sustainable councils in the country. But in practice, what that means in terms of the outcome is we want to improve how services are delivered, including through innovative approaches, reduce the costs of delivering services, including for the longer term, and to improve or sustain defined outcome for Essex residents. So that is what we said we want to do. And in terms of the how we are measuring effectiveness of the programme, that is how we'll be measured against those three key touchstones. So we set out a strategy. So how will we do this? So the first thing is, as I've said, to establish a single transformation programme. That at first was quite challenging. It meant putting our arms around everything that people was calling transformation, or was indeed transformation, and bringing it in to a single programme to ensure that we had the most efficient use of resources, but also that we could really understand what change we had out there. Was it duplicating? Was it actually working against each other? And as we went through the programme, ensure that we focused that change on delivering the strategy and the outcomes. How do we eat the elephant? It's one bite at a time. We've broken the project down into both transition states, which takes it over time, and Debbie will go through a bit more detail of that, but also delivery portfolios. How do we group like-minded projects together and give them a clear outcome focus? We will increasingly align change activity with partners across the public sector. That's going to be even more important depending on the outcome of the white paper, and I'm sure that will come up as what does that mean? We will base our decisions on evidence and data and expect benefits that to be high impact, measurable, and aligned to political priorities. So back in the early autumn, we did a review of all of the change projects in the programme, and we run that ruler over it. And we reduced the number of change projects within transformation from around 90 to just over 50 to ensure that those in the transformation programme we're going to deliver the highest impact. That is where our main focus. And that meant stopping some projects. That meant moving some projects to business as usual. So it was a good thing they was doing, but it wasn't transformational. Pausing projects for review at a later stage in the transformation programme, or indeed carrying on, but providing more focus in terms of resource. So the next thing is we'll place equal emphasis on long-term prevention and solving the here and now. And an example of that is we've got a business case coming to Transformation Oversight Board, which is our internal governance for the programme on Monday, which is looking at the issue of foster carers. And how we can increase the number of foster carers. We're already one of the very best at this in the country and have bucked the trend that has seen a big decline in foster carers. And the reason we're doing that is because for a young person going into care or in care, their best life chances, all the evidence says their best life chances are when they are within a stable family environment, including foster care. It is also, for the public purse, the most cost-effective way of doing it. So the next thing is we will, and this fits with the two, we will experiment with new ideas and take active decisions about slowing down, speeding up and ceasing projects to maximise delivery. So we've already done that, but the experimentation sits with the embracing digital opportunities. So I think it's fair to say we are, at the very least, one of the leading councils in the country now on AI. We have 6 proof of concept projects running, which will feed back in a collective in the new year. The LGA has already contacted us and asked us to demonstrate how we are doing this to the wider public sector. We don't know everything. The programme isn't about just experts. It's about the people who are working in the services. They often have the best ideas. And we've set up a number of initiatives, Essex Sparks as one of them, and what was the other one? The Cracker Challenge. Cracker Challenge. So a couple of initiatives with our employees to bring forward either good ideas or help them solve a wicked problem. And that's had a lot of traction and some really, really good. So this isn't a programme just about subject, experts. This is a programme that has a really, really big focus on the people who are doing the job being given a voice and resources to be able to test out their ideas. And the final one is we will support all our employees to engage with the ambition of this programme and build that optimistic and collective culture within ECC. And we have spent, as we did in the previous transformation programmes, which, again, bucking the trend, saw employee engagement increase during that change programme, whereas in most cases it goes down. We are spending a lot of time and resource both communicating, listening with our employees and engaging them with it. We've just had our first staff survey since we've done this. We will be analysing the results of that early in the new year and drilling down any areas where we need to do, where we've done well on this and might want to expand it, any areas which we need to do more and we need to do better on. So that's the end of my bit. And Debbie's now going to go in, but I just wonder if there's any questions on the why are we doing it and how are we doing it strategically before we go into the Debbie's bit, which is more the nuts and bolts of it.
Councillor Buckley.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Don't have to explain the whys. I think we can all understand the whys. I think more concerned around the hows and the outcomes. Yeah. I just got three points actually, which I just wanted to ask related to your presentation. Yeah. First of all, what I would call the law of unintended consequence. Yeah. And I use the example of work from home, which you mentioned. Yeah. And of course, if there's less people in a locality, then it potentially damages some of the businesses that feed off of that population. I'm thinking of the coffee bar type arrangement. Second point, you mentioned about public sector partners. Yes. I wholeheartedly agree that the public sector should work as one to deliver services. My experience of that, though, has been rather to the contrary, particularly dealing with the National Health Service, which, given the role of this committee, is probably the key external partner.
Yeah.
So I'd like to hear your thoughts around how we can pressurise, persuade, or otherwise entice NHS in particular to work in a much more collaborative manner than it has done in the past. And the final question, you mentioned around staff being asked for ideas, and certainly one of the things that I've learned over too many years in business is that the person at the coalface is probably the one with the best ideas. But I've always also found that encouragement is necessary to bring them forward. And in previous employments, I've set up things like incentive schemes where if you can save £100,000, well, 10% of that in year one goes to the person that identified it. Yeah. We're still £90,000 up. Are we looking at anything like that? Maybe that's with the public sector, but you know, incentivising people to think outside the box is something I think which perhaps discourages them from just saying, oh, well, I've got to move something from box A to box B and that's it. Why not jump into box C?
Okay, so I'll deal with those three questions. So the first one is about working from home. That's a societal change. There is...
Sorry, I wasn't intending that as the actual question, but the consequence.
The consequence of working from home is a societal change. But what we are looking at as part of this programme is the connectivity between technology, property and ways of working. So I think in the past we've looked at them slightly separately. They all sit within my portfolio, and we are now looking at ways of working in its totality, and to ensure that the way that we do things here and the interaction between whether people working from home or from another partner's base or within one of our offices, the technology that they need to do that, the type of working environment that they need to do that. We're now looking at that in a holistic and focused way. And as an example, we have Ely House in Basildon, where we are about to share it with the Safer Essex Roads Partnership, the police. And that will be one of our most populous buildings on every day because we've almost overdone it. But bringing people into a building that is, you know, was set up for the 1970s doesn't encourage people to come in. And actually, what we've found is people don't come in to work on their laptop to do work. What they come in to collaborate. And what we have is largely still a workspace that is designed for people to come and sit at desks. So we're going to be investing money at Ely House, where we will be creating, and we'll be doing this almost a bit of as a pilot, creating what we're calling as a modern workplace, where actually the balance will shift from sitting at your desk and looking at your screen to collaborating either formally or informally with your colleagues. As part of this, we will also be looking about so working from home has almost happened a bit by default. You know, there have been discussions here, teams set up charters. It's happened a bit by default and a bit localised. We will be looking at what is the best pattern of working to ensure we have the highest levels of productivity. And we already know we're the most productive county council, but highest levels of productivity. But also we can recruit and retain people who are many of the younger people coming into the workplace now. All they've ever known is hybrid working, and they are not. We're seeing they're not going to come and work in a where it's about bums on seats 5 days a week, whether you need to or not. So we're not imposing that. We're looking at it through a study. We're going to be working with academia in Essex to help us with this, to really identify what is the most effective way of working, the most productive way of working holistically, not just what do people do. In terms, I'm going to skip to the third one, incentive schemes. So at the moment, we don't have incentive schemes, and we are not finding that being any barrier whatsoever about the enthusiasm and excellent ideas that are coming forward. People, what we are finding, our employees really want to be engaged in this. We're not playing lip service, and I think this is what I've seen in other organisations in the past, where people come with ideas and it's, oh yeah, well that would never work, thanks very much. We're applying the part of our whole council strategy which says, do you know what, we're going to try things. The fact that we've already delivered £600 million of savings means we have done most of what anybody has done in the country. Everything we are doing now, and the fostering project that's coming next Monday is an example, everything that we are doing now is pushing the boundaries. So we're not saying to people, no, that's too difficult, that wouldn't work. We're saying, here's some money, here's some result. Tell us how you get on, and let's see if there's something actually is never going to work, but we've had a look. And we'll stop it, or it is going to work and it comes into the transformation programme and gets scaled up. So Thomas Edison said, I didn't fail in trying to deliver the light bulb. I just found 10,000 ways it didn't work before I found the one it did. And we're really taking that mentality. But what we have got is the discipline, which I think, again, in many other organisations, once something's got started, stopping it is impossible. The real discipline, if this is not going to work, we are going to stop it and then move on to the next. So,
thank you. I've got a couple more questions. So I don't know whether you'd finished answering.
I've got one more further.
Sorry to have interrupted you.
So in terms of, so I'm not going to talk specifically about the NHS as a partner, because I think that's more of a question for Councillor Spence, who deals with them on a day-to-day basis. But what I would say as a generalisation is that in Essex there are partners who are really up for working with us now, and there are others which actually are either more reluctant to do that or have actually got other immediate priorities. And what we are doing is working with the coalition of the willing and able and moving things forward. In North Essex, we have a really successful joint shared procurement hub. We're doing things around property. So that's our focus. And we will work with partners as and when the circumstances are right, or as and when, whether they're directed to by national government.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Stamp and then Councillor Henry. I've got a question at the end.
Thank you, Chairman. Just 3 questions. You said about the projects, and I've got one question on that. And you said about the highest impact. You're actually looking to deliver the projects with the highest impact, I think your words were. Can you give me an example of one of the projects that's going to deliver the highest impact? And would that have any cost, depending on your answer, for the minority of our residents, i.e. any social benefits that are going to be lost?
So I'll let Debbie go through. So we've got all the projects.
Is that after?
Yeah. So we've got. So we're later in the presentation. Debbie will go through all of the projects. Okay. But I'll take you back to the whole council strategy, which says what we're aiming to do. How we're doing this is improve or sustain defined outcomes for Essex residents. Now, in some cases, we do things and there are no defined outcomes, and we will be defining those as part of this programme. But the aim of this programme is not to reduce service levels or outcomes. We might do it in a different way. but not to reduce outcomes, but to either sustain them or improve them. But Debbie will give you some examples of from these delivery portfolios on some of the really high impact ones when she goes through the projects.
I'll be interested when you do, because I think that's an impossible task. And I think there's always going to be somebody who's going to suffer from a transformation programme of this size. So I'll keep that powder dry. The second question is, we will embrace digital opportunities increasingly as we secure our technology foundations. What assurances can you give anybody who's actually going to be signing up to that, of their GDPR, and that it's going to be protected? Because obviously if you've got technology in people's places, who's maintaining it, who's looking after it? And the reason I actually am referring to that is because there has been a recent internal audit, and I think there are some areas that we could possibly improve on as a council regarding cybersecurity and people's technology and information. So if you're actually rolling out a greater programme, one would assume that we're going to have to get our ducks in a row to start with. So I'd be interested in an answer to that one. And the final one through you, Chair, is you've said you've got 6 artificial intelligence programmes, projects running. Are you able to give us an example of one? Because I was surprised. I don't watch Strictly Come Dancing very often, but I think I saw a Twitter when the lovely gentleman who's blind asked what the other dancer was wearing or something, and he said, oh, what his demeanour was, and he put his phone to him, and the AI said what this gentleman looked like. And I was absolutely fascinated because I didn't realise it could do something like that. So is that sort of the area you're
I've got the slide here and I'll give you an example.
Thank you. So just the 2 final questions.
So the highest impact, Debbie will cover some of those. In terms of data, so GDPR and data security, so we already have a really big focus on that here, and there are always sometimes issues, but they are, compared to the size of the organisation, they are minimal. In terms of the cyber security, yes, you're right, something is going to audit next week. What I would say is 2 things. One is almost all of the areas that were identified would have either been already dealt with or will have been dealt with by the timescale, most of which is 31st of this month. However, they are things that are improving what we have. They're not areas where actually they've resulted in any weakness. So we've had a number or some very, very serious cyber attacks. And for those people who are at the audit committee, Ed Garzes, who's our Director of Technology, will be going through some of those, and we've not been affected at all. Other councils in Essex have, and we've been able to take what we have as a resource and actually support them in getting back up and running. So I think that's what I would answer there. And your third question was, oh yes, an example of
I'm on the audit committee.
Well, you'll hear more about it. You'll hear more about it on.
Hopefully, if it's not.
Yeah, you'll hear more about it on Monday. No. Okay, so one of them is transcribing assessment discussions in real time to repopulate forms. Yeah, that's an example. That's in an example of one of them in adult social care. So
that's the support for the council, not the support for the user. Are we doing anything for the user? What I would call the person at the end that we're trying to improve the facilities for and our.
Well, so what we have at the moment, so just to be clear, at the moment, we're not running AI projects as in projects we're implementing. We're running some projects which are teaching us about how AI works in an organisation. Those organisations who pick up AI and just try and do it often find that it doesn't work. The projects that we're running are really to teach us how best to use AI how to avoid the pitfalls of AI and how and where we might roll it out further. So these are very much proof of concepts.
So what I've suggested may be a vision for the council.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the absolute intention will be for AI to benefit, directly benefit our residents and also benefit the running of the council. But what we're not doing is in an area that is very new to a lot of people, is we're not just leaping into it. We're running 6 projects almost as proof of concept, and we will take the learning from that before we move into developing actually ones that we're going to roll up and scale up.
Thank you. I mean, actually, I find that quite an interesting point because we all know that one of the complaints that people have, whether it's children's services or social care or whatever, is that a number of people go along and visit them and they have to fill in the same form over and over again and answer the same questions.
Yeah.
That's really frustrating for people. If that could be...
Well, that is the first one I mentioned.
Absolutely.
So it takes, it pre-populates all the forms you could ever, which I suppose is a direct benefit. It's a benefit for both the social workers, but also for the residents. One
of the complaints that we get all the time is, well, I've had to tell 3 different people the same thing 3 times. So I think that would be helpful. I've got Councillor Henry.
Just 3. Yeah, just 3.
And thank you for your presentation and the huge pack. It's like reading. Can I ask a question? You mentioned staff surveys and things like that. And I know that you're still to go through the detail of that to see what the response is. Can you tell me whether or not the participation response, which you'll be able to tell during, is that consistent with or is it up? Has it increased?
So we've done 2 surveys actually. So one is the ECC wide survey, which is done every 2 years, which is the one that Councillor Lewis was just talking about. So that happened in September, and both our rate of response is increased from 2022 and our rate of engagement. So increased both in terms of the number of people who've replied and the positivity of their response. Also, back in the summer, we did a pulse survey, which is a much smaller survey. We sent it out and made it optional for people to engage. Only 700 people replied to that, although that's actually quite a good response for something that's sort of not mandatory. And in that, we were able to ask much more open questions about whole council transformation. So we got some specific feedback from that about the sorts of things that employees wanted to hear from us. So we've got both methodologies going on.
And I think on the main one, engagement is up, which is great. What we're drilling down to is, well, is engagement gone up despite what we're doing around employee communications, or actually is there a direct correlation? Is what we're doing impacting the positivity of engagement?
But I think with engagement, you're going to find that if engagement goes up, it's either people are really, really fed up, or that there's something, there's an opportunity to tell you something.
Well, response rate, generally in organisations where people are unhappy, and I think you've alluded to this, the first thing you see is the response rate drop off because people don't even bother to respond. So the fact that our response rate has increased and we've got a higher engagement score is really positive. It mirrors what happened last time and is the best outcome we could want. But we're not just saying, oh, well, that's great, let's pat ourselves on the back. We're saying we need to drill down and we need to understand, looking at the individual questions, is what we're doing around our engagement with staff about transformation actually, is that driving that, or is it something else? But also, are there parts of the organisation that are particularly high, and normally corporate organisations are normally higher? And do we have parts of the organisation which may either be, maybe geographically distant from it? Are they low? So are there things we need to do in particular areas of the organisation?
Thank you.
So I think overall, the initial picture is very positive.
Okay. My next question is largely around one that Councillor Buckley asked about buildings, the byproduct of people suddenly working from home. In Chelmsford, and I know this because I've had several stores in Chelmsford over the last 35 years in retail, is probably 600 to 700 people coming out of my daytime economy. So that's passing traffic that's gone. And quite a few, you know, Mike will be able to tell you as a local member that that's had a massive impact on retail. And we get that there's a byproduct for that, because what you end up with is larger towns where offices are. People don't tend to shop in those, but maybe perhaps Billericay High Street or Wickford maybe have better passing traffic because people are closer to home on the lunch break. So there's a, you know, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. We also understand that there's a byproduct of actually how many times over the years have we not taken on the perfect person for our role because actually she just needed the job to work with school drop-off, and we're able to do that now. But you come back to then the thing they're not doing, which is coming here. And it's a big building and it can't do everything, and certainly you've got an old half and a new half, which is more versatile. But every town's got a big council building that's sitting virtually empty. What do we do? And what can we do with them? Because we seem to have more buildings than we know what to do with. I know that obviously we announced the other day that we've got, I think, a lease with Shire Hall, so that we're dealing with that. But the Shire Hall's not just the one building. We've got this, we've got others that used to be this. What can we do with those? We've actually convening space, and we, you know.
Yeah. So we've actually got a whole property transformation programme, which is separate, which is part of this. And we could have a whole session on this, and the corporate scrutiny committee probably will. But what I would say is we only actually now have 5 offices in the whole county council, like offices. We have operational sites like depots and libraries and adult community learning centres, but we've already significantly, even before this, significantly rationalised our workspace. But what we're aiming to do, just go back to my point, is make our workspaces a place where people want to come to collaborate. Because actually, I think that the biggest, this is for me the biggest issue around the working from home is actually that, not the formal collaboration when you come in for a meeting, but the informal collaboration. So prior to COVID, as members, we would have seen people quite often bumping each other in the members area, and it would be the opportunity for members to raise issues with each other, or members, particularly backbenchers, to speak to cabinet members, and those informal, unplanned, or sometimes planned, if you know what I mean. I'm going to catch him when he goes for a tea. Planned interactions are what we've lost most about the hybrid working, and that is the same for our employees, and indeed, you know, the public and private sector at large, which is why some organisations have said, you're coming in X amount of time. I think the Metropolitan Police have said this to their civilian staff, and they're not very happy about it. But I think it's, if you just say you've got to come in, but actually you've not created the right environment for that. You just come in and sit in front of a laptop as opposed to staying at home and doing that is perhaps not a good trade-off. But come in and formally and informally collaborate with your colleagues, actually in a space that is designed for that, then actually you're more likely to achieve that.
Thank you. A final question, if I can, Chairman. Obviously, I'm chair of HOSC. I would ask this question of everybody, and we're seeing transformation everywhere, whether it be the ambulance service, the hospitals, mental health, or whatever. So the question I would ask you would be the question I have asked them, is what are you doing to engage with our biggest partner, which is the taxpayer, or patients, or residents, whatever. How will and when will residents be part of the information cycle to help us make those decisions? Because our tick boxes don't matter when Betty at number 42 doesn't understand why she can't get through, or what she used to get, she's not getting anymore.
So the place where that will happen, it's not at this big program transformation. It will be as the individual projects begin to develop. So, for example, the foster carer one, there's already a lot of engagement with it. What has been designed has already been back of it, a lot of engagement with existing foster carers to understand why they do it, what would be the barriers to doing more of it. So it will be the individual projects where without that engagement, where people can understand what does this mean to me. So if I sat and talked about this to the person you mentioned, and for example, my elderly neighbour, they wouldn't be able to necessarily say, yes, but what does that mean to me? So that it's the projects where we will be doing that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
But I could take you back to my initial point, one of my initial points. The aim is to sustain or improve what people have, the outcomes people are getting, but that doesn't necessarily mean they'll be doing it in the same way. And the example that we've talked about is instead of having to fill in multiple forms, if we do roll out that one, it will mean to give the information once and everything else is then repopulated. But we will tell them that's going to happen.
Thank you. We've got two more questions. I've got Councillor McCrory and Councillor May. And I've got one comment myself, and then we'll move on.
Thank you, Chairman. I think we talked earlier that this was going to be about strategy, but I think we've got into nuts and bolts as well. So I'm sort of mixing up both. But on the sort of strategy one, obviously this is a 2030 programme.
Yeah.
And we all know that next Monday we'll find out, what the future holds, hopefully, in a bit more detail than what we know now. So I'm just wondering how you feel that's going to sort of play out.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind there's a number of options, but at the moment this is sort of focused just on Essex County Council as it is now.
Yeah.
I would imagine you've sort of tried to future-proof it to an extent that it can be rolled out if the county is broken up into different parts. So just your thoughts on that, please. And then, going back to this business of working from home and so on, in the business press and the property press, I mean, they are talking about the trend going back the other way now, aren't they? But so I'm pleased that we're looking at it from the point of view of being sort of flexible and understanding what the real needs are. But so following on from that, there could well be, whatever happens next Monday, a sort of surplus of council across Essex property, and with my county council hat on, selfishly thinking that there could be opportunities for parts of this building to be used by what other councils would have used on their own property, and maybe they'll be disposing of buildings. So, but as you say, we will be talking about that at corporate, the property side of things. But just your thoughts on those points, please.
So we don't, unless you know more than I do, we don't know what's in the white paper. We don't know what it's going to say, and we don't know what the timescale it will set out. And even then, we don't know whether that timescale will be met. So we've known that this white paper is meant to be coming for a long time. It's been delayed, and we've been told it's, it was earlier this month, and then it's going to be Monday, and it may be Monday, but and I think we'll see. It's almost the approach we're going to take, not in a laissez-faire way, but in a pragmatic way. So once we know and have digested, because I suspect what we see on Monday will raise as many questions, as many questions as it will provide answers. Well, once we have more clarity about what it means, and we're never, in the world of change that we're operating in, we can never wait until we've got 100% clarity, because we'll never do anything. Once we've got greater clarity, we will do a review of the programme that we have at the moment. That will be the first thing that we do. And if based on the timescales of when things are due to happen, if a project is due to deliver its benefits within or substantial amount of its benefits within the timescale of the change, then we'll probably keep it running, particularly if it's one that's delivering financial benefits, because the financial problem is not going to go away just because there might be some form of devolution or local government reform. So we still have to carry on with that. If we've got projects that actually their benefits are likely to deliver way beyond the timescale of any significant structural or organisational change, we will probably cease those. And I use the word probably because until we've seen the detail, but just to give. And then there might be projects which actually may deliver benefit either inside the timescale or outside the timescale, but will be beneficial for any future structure. And an example of that will be the fostering one. So regardless of the structure and makeup of local government post 27, 28, 29, whatever it is, we know that as a county that we need a lot more foster carers than we've got at the moment in order to keep young people going into care, because that's better for their lifetime chances. And whatever organisation there's going to be, it's going to be more financially effective for them. So I think that will be the lens that we look at when we have digested, not just received, digested and got all the questions that were raised are answered to a level of which we could say we can see the direction of travel. So this programme is a bit for those who are sailors, and if you're not, please bear with it. But when you set off from shore on a sailboat, you know roughly where you want to get to, but the wind and the tide will blow you left and right and back and forth. So you're correcting how you're getting where you're going. And that's what a programme is like here. And there will be a number of stop-offs on the way. But the end is that really nice restaurant on that really nice island. That's your aim. But you will be correcting, and you may have to stop off, and you may have to put the anchor down and let the storm pass. And that's what this transformation programme will be like. But we know where we need to go, but that's how we'll navigate. And this, the white paper is one of those things where we'll probably need to put the anchor down, review where we are, and then carry on. With regards to your specific question around surplus property, I think there's already a lot of surplus property or underutilised property, and that was happening even before COVID, which is why certainly as a county council, and I'm sure other councils have been doing this as well, have either been co-locating with other partners or consolidating into a smaller number of offices. And all I would say is, well, that will carry on. But the difference is depending on what the white paper tells us, that might carry on less as a collaboration and more as either a necessity or as a direction.
Okay, Councillor May, I've got one question myself.
Sorry, mine's just basic.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
What you're talking about is really important and the way forward, because technology changes. I mean, I can remember walking down with my mum and dad to the payphone to make a phone call to Nan and Grandad, and then house phones come in. and that was a big change in mobile phones and that. So it's really important going forward with this. But one of the things that I find is really important and procedures should be put in is you can have all the technology, but you need team building. Because working together, you can achieve, personally, I feel that you can achieve a lot more than just what something's being said on the screen. So yes, the technology going forward is really important because we would have been sitting here one time with loads of papers about what you're talking about. Now we've got it on the screen. So that's really important, but team building and working staff and all that together is really important. So a programme needs to be done on that as well, I believe.
And absolutely, and that is why we're looking at holistically, and that's why we're here today in person, because sometimes there is no substitute for sitting and talking to people face to face. You know, we could have done this on Teams. Technologically, we could have done this on Teams. I think that personally, I think the level of interaction and questioning would have been at a lower level. I think there are things that are better done in person. You know, a quick 20-minute call with somebody to clarify something. Do I need to? Well, I'm actually quite close. I'm quite fortunate. But Debbie lives. I won't say where she lives, but she lives a lot further because it's
On
been
YouTube.
recorded. Yeah, on YouTube. She lives a lot further away. So dragging her into County Hall for a 20-minute catch-up is about something he's probably not. But we do meet on a monthly basis, in fact, a fortnightly basis, in person, because actually a programme like this, we need to talk things through in person. But a quick 10-minute, what's happening with this, I don't need to drag somebody into County, or neither do I need to drive it. So technology is there for our benefit, but you're absolutely right, that interpersonnel collaboration is absolutely important, which is why we're now looking at how do we work through the lens of those people interactions, the property designed for that, not property designed in the 1970s way of working, and the technology that can best enable both of those.
Thank you. I've got one question, mainly about productivity, and clearly this whole programme is about that. We know that the the public sector nationally is well down on its productivity levels. Not necessarily here, but that is the situation. This is me asking a question as an engineer as much as anything. You know, if you do something, you need to know how to measure whether it's been successful. What processes are you going to put in place in parallel with this to be able to measure the outcomes when they come? You know, if we're looking at an increase in productivity levels, it's not necessarily about how hard people work. People mostly work hard anyway, but it's about the success of that hard work. How are you going to measure that? Clearly, there'll be different nuances in different portfolios that need to do. But are you looking at ways as part of the programme to be able to measure where it started and where it finishes?
So as an engineer, I can answer logic. I can answer yes and leave it there. But as a cabinet member for transformation, because I'm also an engineer, as a cabinet member for transformation, the answer is yes, and the council has its own performance team, and the work that we are doing on this programme is now being fully integrated into the council's performance. So we will be able to map across all areas of the council's performance, including productivity, but not just productivity, the effectiveness of what we are doing here. So that we understand if we've got this project and we're investing this and we're saying this project is going to deliver those outcomes, can we see that in the council's performance? So we're integrating the performance function within the council and the transformation programme. And at the Transformation Oversight Board, next one is Monday, we get a monthly update on the performance of the programme, and in the very near future, we're going to get with that the linkage between that and the performance of the key performance areas of the council. As the projects begin to implement, are we seeing the change that we're expecting? And if we're not, then there's that feedback loop to adjust and correct. A bit like I said about the, adjusting your course, etc.
No, thank you. I mean, I think that's interesting because I think that there is some difficulty in measuring that because of, if you worked in a commercial business, it's relatively easy and straightforward, and you give somebody a bonus if they performed well or achieved a lot. One of the things that we, as a local authority, pride ourselves in, and the staff do generally, is the public service ethos. There is that need to witness that you've done some good in your role.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily about the money that you're paid for doing it. And I certainly had a conversation this week with somebody who was very pleased at the outcome of what they've done, but admitted that it was of no financial benefit to them, only to the people they did. So there's an ephemeral process to measure there, isn't there, which is quite difficult.
Yeah.
Not quite the same.
And one of the ways we measure that, what you're describing, is through our employee engagement. So are the people who work for the county council, do they feel good? Do they feel valued? Do they feel that they're making a difference? Which are key questions of areas within our employee engagement survey. So do people feel they're making a difference? When they work wherever that might be at the moment, are they making a difference to, depending on the role, to other employees? If they work in HR, maybe, are people capable of doing their job because of the learning and development opportunities, or are they making a difference to a young carer somewhere?
No, thank you. I know Debbie wants to do, and I know you've got limited time.
I do have limited time, but I mean, it's such a huge area in terms of.
I think we need to, sort of subject to your time constraints, and actually our own. I think we need to hear a little bit from you at least to see where we go from here.
And that's why, although Councillor Lewis has said all the right things, which is always good.
And completely unrehearsed as well. So integrity there as well.
So I mean, I won't labour this. I know we've.
How much time have we got?
What time is the safeguarding board due?
They're due to arrive.
4 o'clock.
But it's.
So perhaps if I pose the two questions to you that we discussed at our pre-meeting, which I think will be helpful from our perspective from the committee. So we've shared with you the list of projects that are currently sit under the auspices of this committee, and also whether perhaps if you can.
It's
the triangle that shows how the project split.
Someone needs to move.
Yeah.
Slide 13, I think.
13. No, 13. That's back one.
A bit left.
Yeah, of course, that's the one. That's the one.
Sorry.
That's all projects. So if you go to one that looks like that, just for people and families, that's the one. That's the one. Okay. So this is the overview.
This is just adults.
This is independent adults. This is the overview of how the projects in this portfolio split across the 3 areas. If we've got the next one, please. And this is the one for children's, so 15 projects in total. What would be really helpful for us is if looking at the projects and the next level of detail, which says what they're trying to achieve, is further down in the presentation. Are there any areas that your committee oversees that you think are missing from the projects that we're looking at the moment? So and then we can look at whether actually that might be a timing issue, or we've looked at it and discounted at the moment. Really be helpful. Are there any areas that your committee looks over which are not currently in the transformation? The timing of this is really important because we're looking at the next transition state, and by March we will be signing that off. So that will be the set of projects that will be ready to go, some of which will include the existing ones and some new ones that will be ready to go in June 25 for whichever administration comes back. They will have a set of transformation projects to run. The second area is are there any projects that are currently that we have that you would like a further session to have a deeper dive into and understand, you know, what is it they're trying to achieve? How are they trying to achieve it? How is this going to impact residents? And then we can come back at a future with the project leads. So I could give you an overview as Debbie could, but Debbie could give you a much more detailed overview. We will bring the service lead and the project lead to enable you. They will talk in much greater detail about their project, and you can ask more detailed questions about their project. So those two things would be really helpful for us.
Okay. Well, I think probably as a committee, and I don't know whether anybody would say the same, we probably need to go away rather than giving you.
Oh, yeah, we're not asking that now. We're asking you to reflect on that and then come back.
Constraints that we've got is clearly on time between now. We've got 3 meetings scheduled for the new year. So I think we're going to need to get into a huddle as far as we're concerned and come back to you probably after Christmas. Excuse me, with a set of those things. Obviously, given the time constraints, if I survive, we're not going to be able to go into those in huge detail between now and May. But I think rather similar to the process that we did with adult social care in preparation for the CQC review, it would be quite good to perhaps schedule a meeting in the new year where we can start to go into those and at least set the agenda running for the future. So I think that's probably going to be the way forward with that, because I mean it's always good to have people not involved in things, because sometimes they come up with the patently obvious, don't they, that you miss when you're
when you're really close to it, and that's where that one step back overview of this is really helpful.
Sarah, can I say something?
Yes, sir.
I think we're very restricted in time, and like I said at the pre-meet, and forgive me if I'm incorrect saying this, I don't feel it's the scrutiny's job to do that. I think it's your role to bring that to scrutiny, that we scrutinise those areas that you feel most probably need some more scrutiny or input on. It's down to other members if they agree with me or they don't, but due to our work programme that we've already got scheduled in, I think you're asking us to do something which is going to be very, very difficult to achieve, and I personally don't see as our role, because like at the CQC, we had the presentations, we were given it, and I thank you for your presentation, it's very comprehensive, but I don't see how we could actually achieve that from my point of view, Chair.
Thank you.
Could I just respond to that? So my understanding that this is a policy and scrutiny committee rather than just scrutiny committee. Yeah, people and families policy and scrutiny committee. So I think the role of this committee is both. I think it can shape almost like the pre-scrutiny. It can shape what we're doing, and it can also look at what we're proposing and ask questions about it. But if there was one area where I think it would be really helpful, is there anything missing from your perspective? And this is really looking at your area and saying, actually, we think there should be something around this. That would be really helpful. That's almost that second pair of eyes. Is there something which you consider as a committee really important, which is not currently in the transformation programme, which you believe should be, that would be really helpful.
Councillor Henry.
And I think it is a policy and scrutiny committee, but I think there's all these capacity aspects, and obviously, like HOSC, people and families have return items that we rely on, such as safeguarding, sitting up there, the regular returnees send and various other things. I think for my part, there's a couple of bits on there that don't need to be on there that are actually HOSC. There's other things that I certainly, Mike stepped over in the room, will be hounding, because for 4 years, the man has never left a meeting without mentioning 106 contributions. So something like that, and how we as a council put pressure on to get that money moving, get that money spent, get that money where it needs to be. So that would be it from me. Thank you for the presentation. It's quite fascinating. I have no idea what sort of impact that's going to have, given what we do or do not know about what's going to or going to not happen next week, about whether we will or will not exist next month.
I don't think we're not exist next month. I think the timescale is years.
If my cough gets any worse,
Yeah.
what I would suggest, and I think probably the best way forward would be for us to have an informal meeting, maybe straight after Christmas, and then we can look at ways to take this forward in the most effective way, both for you and for us, given the time constraints. You know, don't want to promise to do something and find that we
It's more if you're able to, if you're within your, the constraints of your work plan and a resource, that would be really helpful feedback for us.
Well, I think then if we could say that in the new year we'll get together, and the huddle probably includes you as well, then that would be quite most productive then. If you're happy with that.
Yeah, absolutely. That works for us.
Great. Well, we can allow that to be set up.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for coming along. And
thank you for your engagement. I personally, I think presentations are fine. For me, question and conversation, which is what I feel we've had here today, is always far more productive. So thank you for that.
And I just have to say that I hate working at home. It's all the jobs I've get given.
Thank you ever so much.
Microphone.
Thank you for inviting us today. Pleasure to be here as always. And as you've noticed, I have representatives of the executive team for the board with me who kindly have offered to come and support in case you have particular questions of the police, ICBs or adult social care. So with your agreement, if it's okay, I'd like to introduce my colleagues.
Yes, certainly. Well, given that one's written in pencil, I mean to see it. We really look forward to it.
Thank you, Chair.
Hi everyone, I'm Natalie Hammond and I work as the Chief Nurse for Hertfordshire and West Essex Integrated Care Board.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Giles Thorpe. I'm the Executive Chief Nurse for Mid and South Essex Integrated Care Board.
I'm Deborah Stewart-Angus, the Independent Chair of the Safeguarding Adults Board for Essex.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Michaela Jury and I'm the board member for the Safeguarding Board in Essex.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Ali Clark. I'm the Head of Safeguarding and Mental Capacity in Adult Social Care.
Morning, everybody. I'm Tracy Wellham and I'm Head of Safeguarding for Suffolk and North East Essex, ICB.
Morning everyone, Matt Cornish, I'm a Detective Superintendent, I'm the Head of Domestic Abuse and as of about 4 weeks ago I've also got Adult and Child Safeguarding, so please be gentle.
Over to you.
Thank you. Would it be okay for you to put the presentation up, please, Jasmine?
Yeah.
Whoever's doing that.
Thanks, Gemma.
Go on to slideshow. Could it go to slideshow? Thank you.
Just taking it step.
Okay. So this is our presentation today of the board's annual report. It's one of our statutory responsibilities to share this with you on an annual basis. And we report a year behind the financial year back to 23, April 23. So first slide, please. So basically in our pre-meets, we had some kind of initial discussion around the journey the board's been on and where we're at now. I've been in tenure for 5 years this year, so wow, I didn't know it was going to be that long, but hey, good things come. So my focus has been as a chair initially on getting the basics right. Making sure, for example, there was a quality assurance framework for safeguarding adult reviews, making sure that we had a strong executive team, which required a board restructure and a strong management team, hence the appointment of Michaela, ultimately so that we could be collaboratively productive, which I think really is probably my mantra. We have strong shared decision-making and a strong partnership, hence our representation today. Next slide, please. In relation to the annual report, which you've probably managed to have a glance at, we've had some key successes, which I think are important to note because this is such a busy board. Things happen all of the time, and sometimes it's hard even for me, and I think for us as a team, to recollect actually what we have achieved in that reporting year. So these are some of the things. This is slide 1 of 2 of the things that we've achieved. So, for example, access to information for the public has increased. We've designed a new website, we've increased accessibility, we've improved navigation, we went live in November 23. We dovetailed this with the national launch of the Safeguarding Adults Week campaign at the time. And now, excuse me, we regularly receive 16,000 visitors a month. And have attracted 11,000 first-time users and 8,500 views on the reporting safeguarding concerns page. We've developed social media to bring about public engagement. We've used education, signposting, excuse me, I'm just getting over flu, and awareness with posts and links to support organisations out there. In the reporting year, we had 186,756 engagements, and we attracted an audience of 2,921 across Facebook, X, and newsletter subscribers. We deployed safeguarding campaigns, National Safeguarding Adults Awareness Week on elder abuse, National Stalking Day, Mental Health Week, and Carers Week. We've delivered training. It's an interesting one, this, because lawfully, we don't have a statutory obligation to provide training, so we're not a training provider, because obviously providing training is resource implied and resource issues. But we have a duty to spread learning and share learning. And we do that in all different types of ways, but we do use some training as well. The training that we've done, we've got all kinds of different training. For some examples, designated safeguarding adult lead, safeguarding adults basic awareness, risk-taking, unwise decision-making, train the trainer. I could go on, but the list is quite huge. I think we've trained over 2,000 people. We have a risk register, we've put that into place, which we've continuously reviewed during the year. We've updated a format of a risk scoring system. All partners are involved in decision-making around this. It's multi-agency, but managed by the executive team here. We make decisions jointly on mitigation for risk at the board. We've adopted the Rough Sleeping Initiative, which was obviously in accordance with the government requirements that came out as a direct edict. We've invited a named representative from Essex County Council for rough sleeping and housing to become a board member. He represents city, district councils and borough councils and housing associations across Essex as with his links. We've also refreshed our constitution and we've maintained a balanced budget. There's more figures later on that, so I'll come back to that later. In relation to safeguarding adult reviews, which as you know is a statutory requirement placed upon us as a board to conduct a review when certain criteria are met in relation to either abuse, neglect or death, or all three. We saw a 50% increase in our referrals in relation to safeguarding adult reviews, which resulted in 16 cases being destined for analytical reviews for further work and lessons learned. One of those cases was a domestic homicide review, which we shared as a safeguarding adults review. This correlated with the increases seen in case referrals in adult social care, of which there were 19,377 in the reporting year. We established a joint DHR SAR, which I'll refer to later, and it was known as SAR Kimmy. I have a legal obligation to provide you with information if a SAR has been published in a reporting year. So in a minute, I'll come back to SAR Kimmy. Our subcommittees continue to improve our SAR processes, particularly our SAR subcommittee, with live and real and regular quality review, consistency and proportionality, making sure early learning is out there on lessons learned from cases that have proved exceedingly difficult. We've submitted all of our published SARs for inclusion in the national research for the second national SAR analysis. And our officers have attended an early briefing on that matter, where it's been established that there are distinct correlations between Essex's findings in relation to SAR and analytics and national SAR analytics. If you're interested in what those themes are, those themes at the moment for the reporting year have been the need for greater professional curiosity in relation to case management, case leadership, an improved application of the Mental Capacity Act, and the need for greater legal literacy in relation to case management, and ultimately practice issues regarding self-neglect. We commissioned a thematic review from the Learning from 7 SARs, which we published in 2022. And this has given rise to the further development of, through research, of an early identification tool, which is now being deployed. We've increased our focus on the multi-agency safeguarding improvement actions from SARs. So just to give that some context, when a SAR is taken place, and then it goes through the process and methodology that we have, and there's various processes and methodologies. And at the end of it, the author will come up with a set of recommendations for improved actions in organisational context for learning and for improved practices for safeguarding activity in those organisations. So part of our job is also to ensure, and this is quite a difficult part, I have to say, is to ensure the embedding of the change within those organisations to ensure that these things won't happen again. We've shared shared a lot of learning as well in relation to that with children's. So what we've done, for example, is we decided to use some of our reserves to put together a project officer post which has now been enactioned in this reporting year. so that embedded actions and learning can actually be monitored through various processes and methods through that specialist role. That's for 12 months. The other work we've shared with children has been around transitional safeguarding, and adult social care have done a lot on that. The agencies, multi-agencies have worked together closely on that to develop what's the various mate space, I think it's called, Alison, for complex cases where there's children coming out of adults, children's services and moving across. And because the law changes, obviously at the point of 18 and sometimes 16, then circumstances can change for that person and that child. So transitional safeguarding has been a big focus for us with children's. And the other thing we focused on with children's as shared project work has been Think Family. We've increased the working across the 5 delivery groups. All delivery groups at our board have a delivery plan. They're all RAG rated. Everything is immediately clear where we're up to at any one point in time. And we've developed a culture of, in some ways, performance management around that, so that our chairs of those boards are fully aware of their commitments and what they have to do in relation to releading. So, sorry, those shouldn't have said boards, committees. So our chairs are fully aware of what they need to do in relation to leading those particular subcommittees. We've also, it also prevents silo working because we integrate and cross-work through those delivery groups. We've worked closely with the 3 ICBs, seeking assurance from them, particularly in response to the Countess of Chester Hospital report, which, if you're not familiar with that, was in relation to Lucy Letby, and the recommendations for focusing on the freedom to speak up policies here in Essex. Alongside this, all 3 ICB directors of nursing and their deputies worked intensively, I have to say, in our executive team. And my thanks go out to them, because what we worked intensively on was ensuring that we aligned the ICB safeguarding strategies and the safeguarding governance that was coming from NHS England to align with the partnership and the safeguarding strategy for Essex, so that there was no duplication, and that we all knew where we were going and what we were doing and which way we were kicking the ball in the relation to the objectives that we'd set in the new strategy for this year. And I have to say it took a while, but we've got there and it's worked very well. Excuse me, that's made our strategic safeguarding priorities the same across all parts of Essex where the ICBs are involved. It made for closer working together, and I actually felt personally that we gained a real understanding of working with each other, and the need to continue to align and the need to continue to interrelate on safeguarding activity and planning. We now have supported, I think, with this approach, a mutual shared assurance, and we've offered the opportunity to triangulate outcomes. I think this was, dare I say, a major achievement for our county, but it was enabled by positive relationships, strong collaboration and effective leadership. Next slide, please. I will get off the achievements in a minute. So what else have we done that I've regarded as an achievement in the annual report? We held EPUT to account, increased their board attendance and worked very closely in collaboration with them too in relation to the Lampard inquiry and pre-Lampard inquiry. Seeking additional assurance from them and safeguarding oversight. We focused a lot in the reporting year on the quality assurance framework for patient safety, and we have sought updates on the rates and percentages that they have in place of DBS checks. Chair visits from myself were planned for this reporting year, which this reporting year took place. They were planned to Linden Ward and Derwent Unit. Also, our Health Executive Forum worked across Southend, Essex and Thurrock regions to promote safe, patient-focused safeguarding, and collaborated on a shared vision to enhance the quality of life, promote health and improve welfare and the safety of adults at risk. They also monitored the delivery of paediatrician capacity, specialist eating disorder services, Tier 4 bed provision, and safeguarding the clinical network programme. Sorry, and the safeguarding clinical network programme. In relation to adult social care, we have reviewed assurance from them after being advised at one point we had a backlog of safeguarding referrals, and that which has been worked through and addressed. And we've given support for the implementation of the new safeguarding adult portal. Resources were added to teams. Ali Clark can tell you more about that if you wish to know about that. But that problem has now been resolved. Essex Police continue to prioritise safeguarding, and they did that, my understanding, through thematic leadership, partnership engagement, and adopted a central safeguarding hub. Continued involvement with the multi-agency risk assessment conference system and structure, and consistent and enhanced risk assessments. They also set up geographically dispersed teams for domestic abuse problem solving, focusing on repeat victimisation, and mental health collaboration obviously was a priority given the Right Care, Right Person initiative. This also fostered a closer relationship with EPUT and AMP services that enhanced prevention, response and investigation. And in relation to Right Care, Right Person, this initiative initially did pose obviously a degree of multi-agency challenge. This was regarding decision-making thresholds, where police officers determine if their intervention is appropriate in relation to incidents involving people with mental health needs. This was supported by comprehensive training for officers and paralleled with partner briefings, enabling memos of understanding to develop between partners and the police, which aimed at aligning understanding together, working practices and collaboration. In relation to district and borough and city councils in Essex, they've played a significant role in the safeguarding adult system, and we are eternally grateful to their staff for working in the departments of housing, homelessness, revenues, benefits, community safety, environmental and public health. As conveners of place, the councils work in partnership obviously with statutory partners and voluntary groups and charities directly serving our Essex residents, aiming to embed safeguarding adult strategy. We have a strong relationship with Angela Hutchins, the Chief Executive, who and our board representative, who shares the information and works alongside other Chief Executives. Essex Fire and Rescue Service, they've focused on safeguarding adults at risk. They've introduced, as you probably have heard, DBS checks to their teams in July 23. This has been pivotal, really, in enhancing the safety and integrity of that service. Because obviously prior to that, it meant that when staff from the fire service were doing safe checks, I think they call safe welfare checks, they're called different things in different counties, that what we found out was that the officers weren't necessarily DBS checked. So that's been a national move, and the person who's led that worked very closely with Essex at one point. They've upheld a national service goal to maintain through this, and their checks are now at 90%, but that was up until April this year. Safer Essex, we work closely with them too. We share debates on planning issues and impact on community safety in Essex, such as the serious violence needs assessment, the review of community safety partnerships, Essex Police Public Perception Survey, unpaid work and community payback, Operation Dial, which was about a Home Office, ASB, hotspot pilot, Right Care, Right Person, and tackling fraud and violence, particularly in relation to violence against women and girls. HMP Chelmsford have continued to build links with adult social care. However, they have had a difficult year in their attendance, which we are addressing and are in the process of having various conversations about. But their enhanced work with adult social care and the work that adult social care and Chelmsford Prison have done together have ensured that health and social care needs of prisoners have been appropriately assessed, and that is a big move forward. We also work closely with Essex Care Association, who continue to be exceptionally supportive to our board, who we share safeguarding adult practice learning with, and we benefit from their insight and their transparency. We've also worked closely with Essex Probation Services, We've supported them in some of the challenges they've faced as a result of their previous inspection, and we've strengthened safeguarding links with them. Next slide, please. So what I'm going to introduce you to now is the information from our quality subcommittee. So just for reference for memory, the quality subcommittees that we have in place. We have a quality subcommittee, we have one for prevention, we have a shared set committee across the 3 regions for learning and development. We have the Health Executive Forum, and we have have I left what Safeguarding Adult Review. So 5. So this is the quality one. This is what they do and what they've achieved in the year to account to. So they hold oversight of the outcomes particularly from the set Safeguarding Adults assessment that we did. So the region, it's safeguarding for Essex, Thurrock and Southend combined, and we completed a peer assessment audit in relation to the themes that were coming out from what was in place, what needed to be done, what recommendations were. This particular committee worked closely with that, and they ensured that messages from practice, case reviews, audit and quality assurance are triangulated and acted upon. Their aims to improve practice, and they analyse partner shared safeguarding data. So at the moment we receive, in the reporting year, we receive obviously adult social care data, but I made a request in the reporting year to police if they would share data with us too. And very much thankfully they have. So we're now sitting down figuring out how we're going to work with that. And then yesterday, although this is now moving into this reporting year, and my colleague on my left gave me the wonderful news that we are now going to be able to share NHS data in relation to serious concerns. So for the first time, I think ever, it feels like we will be able to have an integrated picture. So that's been the good news at the end of the story. We've managed updates on deprivation liberty safeguard figures. We've been assured, and we've noticed and seen a huge improvement in the management of, not management, in the referral practice and the management of that. So numbers have now started to go down on the adult social care waiting list, and there's been a 38% reduction in the backlog. Again, another good news story. So the quality subcommittee gain oversight of SAR cases as well, because obviously we go to an awful lot of in-depth and detailed analytical work for a safeguarding adult review. There's absolutely no point in doing that unless we spread that news and we share the outcomes and the recommendations from those reviews with each subcommittee, so that they can then build that into their assurance frameworks and their delivery planning. So that's what we do with each committee. This committee also accessed the biannual update from LEADER, from Learning Disability. There's also been a memo of understanding created between LEADER excuse me, and ourselves, because LEADER obviously conduct reviews too, and there's no point in duplicating things. So we have a memo of understanding of how we work those things together. Does everybody know what LEADER is, or do you need me to tell you what that is?
Might help if you just said in case.
Just in case, okay. So LEADER were a group appointed nationally by national government some time ago in relation to the fact that people with learning disabilities and autism tend to have earlier deaths than the rest of the population. So there was the LEADER group was set up in each area across England. Their aims are to improve care for people with learning disabilities and autism, to reduce health inequalities, again for those people, and to prevent people in that group from early death. And where there is an early death, they will review that. If that also falls into the criteria of a safeguarding adult review, if abuse was involved, then we will review it as well, if that is the case. It's not always the case, obviously. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is our prevention committee. So this group struggled a little bit, I think, it's fair to say, for about 8 months. And I think sometimes groups can lose their way. And it's important for me to keep an eye on that and do something about it. So we reconvened this group with a new chair, and I think probably I was what's the word, more deliberate in my desire to ensure that delivery plans were rag rated so that we could not be in a position where if a group was losing its way that we wouldn't know that that was the case. And those reports come to me quarterly, and they come to this team quarterly. So we're all aware now at any one point if groups are feeling that they're not quite where they need to be. So the new prevention committee for 23-24 have been very on it. They've developed the co-production strategy, which is in process at the moment for this reporting year too. They've met with specific training requirements. They raised awareness, and they've strengthened community engagement. And the aim for that in this reporting year in our new strategy will be even stronger. Okay, and they have set out their work plan. So that's moved on. Next slide, please. Excuse me a minute. So the Southend, Essex and Thurrock L&D training subcommittee effectively have produced an enormous amount. The aim of this group is to review from child safeguarding practice insofar as the case reviews that are called CSPRs and safeguarding adult reviews, SARs and DHRs. This year, task and finish groups have focused on the outcomes of the learning from those reviews, and they have focused on professional curiosity and practice, challenging decisions, escalating safeguarding concerns, and think family. The latter considers how we produce a joint approach between children's and adult services and how the multi-agency partnership can gain shared understanding of coordinated risk management. Next slide, please. So this slide now, I think, is the second to last on our committees. So this is our Health Executive Forum. There are some members here today, and this group is made up solely of health representatives who have safeguarding responsibilities across SET. They promote safe, patient-focused and sustainable safeguarding practice, facilitate collaborative working and develop a shared vision to enhance quality of life and improve welfare in our communities. This group is shared with children's. The HEF group, as we call them, continue to support ESAB strategic strategies and have contributed massively to reviewing and restructuring in the ICBs. Cost-saving requirements, obviously, where they've been advised from the NHSE. Monitoring delivery of what I referred to earlier, and also to include in that the Sexual Assault Referral Centre to ensure that needs are met by the local population's needs are met. HEF of shared learning from SAR recommendations on outcomes and impact for health providers. They've implemented the A&E notification assessment process across Essex Acute Trusts, and they've reviewed and restructured work with the ICBs and other things I've said there, implemented serious violence duty, continued to improve and embed the Mental Capacity Act activity and DOLS, developed a work programme on NHSE safeguarding priorities. They've reviewed terms of reference and they've improved their own assurance and governance, and they've now developed an operational group in relation to the safeguarding leads across the whole health system to look at HEF priorities. Again, another form of integration. Bless you. Slide 9, please. Okay, so this is our SAR subcommittee, and this is a highly industrious team and a very busy group. So they've done many things, but some of the examples that they've done, they've introduced a scoping template. This is to improve consistency and proportionality. When we get a case that comes forward where somebody sends a case in to us and says, this case should be a safeguarding adult review, and they write the circumstances down, obviously on a form, and then an awful lot of work goes into making the right decision about whether this should be a review or not. For numerous reasons, it's important to make sure we make the right decision. And frequently, it's a very challenging decision to make. The last part of the decision sits with me. So when the SAR committee have collected all their information, gathered their evidence, made their recommendation. They make a recommendation to myself, and then I take the final decision on the case. So we have an internal quality assurance process, layers of escalation for. We have recently been asked about multi-agency practice observers to attend these meetings to promote internal understanding. And SAR referrers from January in the reporting year have been invited to attend the meetings so that they can see what's involved and that they can add information and guidance to our decision. We've completed the thematic review of 6 SARs. As I mentioned before, commissioned the development of research tool to improve quality. We've identified learning. We want to enable early learning, and some of those things that have happened, for example, are communicating with care providers to emphasise the need to promptly report suspected sexual abuse in care homes to Essex Police. They've developed a flowchart and guidance for registered care home managers on how to respond to suspected sexual abuse in a care home. They've published a set-wide self-neglect policy for use with our hoarding guidance, and we had set up a task and finish group in relation to assist in acute hospitals when a patient decides to leave a ward and access the community to get drugs. We had a 50% increase in our SAR referrals in the reporting year and an increased referral conversion rate. I've got figures if you need to know in relation to what that looks like in more detail. Next slide, please. So the outcomes from this team have continued. They continue to enhance data collection. They identify types of abuse, etc. We've published the SARs, as we've said, in the national analysis. I've already referred to the themes that have come from the SARs. And ESAB partners are committed, obviously, to taking prompt action when we have a referral. Slide 11, please. So this is what I mentioned earlier. This is the case, the tragic case of Kimmy. So it's my duty to bring this case to you in a small amount of detail compared to the actual report, which obviously is there for your perusal. So this was a DHR SAR that was commissioned to identify how agencies work together in this case and to try and improve learning in relation to agency responses in domestic abuse. We made this a joint SAR DHR because it fitted the criteria for both, and we felt that was a wise thing to do. So Kimmy and Alfred were married for 42 years. They lived on a working farm in rural Essex. Kimmy was 73, had been diagnosed with vascular dementia. She was 68 when that happened. Her husband was her carer and had suffered a long history himself of serious physical illness. He was diagnosed with depression in 2008. He was licensed with a firearm and he was a licensed shotgun holder. During the COVID pandemic, a safeguarding concern was raised about Kimmy. And the day after this safeguarding concern was raised,
just in terms of the details of this, obviously it's really helpful for the committee to hear it. Should we turn off the recording because this is?
No, because it's in the public domain. Fine, I wouldn't have.
I just thought I ought to ask that just in case.
Thank you for asking, but no, it's been published, so it's in the public domain.
Thank you.
It's on our website. We have a duty to publish SARs. Obviously, if we don't publish them, we have to have a good reason why. We keep a log of our decisions around publishing and not publishing. But this is on our website. But thank you for asking, Chair. So the husband had a license for a firearm and a shotgun. During the COVID pandemic, somebody raised, I think actually it was probably, I won't say who it was, somebody raised a safeguarding concern about Kimmy, and the day after, the gentleman shot his wife and shot himself. Both died as a result. Kimmy's family had found the provision of care confusing and reported to practitioners and had reported to the SAR reviewer that it was not coordinated. Key themes were identified in this tragedy. The need to support carers who are coming to terms with a close relative who's been diagnosed with dementia. Probably can't stress that one enough. how the dementia diagnosis pathway and support need a whole family approach. How generational attitudes and barriers can actually prevent carers accepting support. How carer stress is significant, and understanding of this and the provision of support to prevent it potentially manifests itself in other forms of abuse, and it's important for practitioners to recognise that. The recognition of safeguarding concerns and appropriately raising and investigating them, and the risks around the lawful possessions of firearms need to include families and also practitioners. To view the recommendations in detail, obviously, we have the briefing report, as I've said, online, and where there's learning about it too. So that's the published case for that particular. In the next reporting year, there will be a lot more than that, because when we manage these processes, sometimes they concertina, and sometimes there's all different dates when things are starting and ending. So it's like a very bright Gantt chart when you look at what that. So that's why there'll be more this year than last year. It doesn't mean to say we worked less though, or we conducted less. Next slide, please. Sorry, I've jumped one. I should have put this in with the other page. That's my mistake. But I'll just briefly go through this because this should have been attached to the committee slides. So please accept my apologies. So this was just to remind you of the some of the work that the Set Policy and Procedures Subcommittee have completed. And as you can see on there, we've got a firearms advice leaflet for practitioners. Lots of things that they've done. I think I've mentioned quite a few of these already. So I'm not going to go through that anymore. Next slide, please. The next slide is just a very quick one to tell you about the abused population of Essex, are largely white people by ethnicity, going from adult social care data. Next slide, please. This is briefly to tell you that the referrals of the population of Essex around abuse are mainly from the age of 66 to 85 plus. They're also mainly women, isn't it? So that gives you some idea of the demographic that we're looking at. Next slide, please. This is to bring you in line with our running costs. So I'm a very poor accountant, but a good oversight person. Chair's already figured out I couldn't do maths the other day. So this is to let you know that in 24-25, so this year, we have just requested an uplift in our financial contributions from our partners, as we haven't requested this since 2012. Effectively, we've improved the service offer with less. It's scary for me to say that, but I actually believe we have. I can evidence it. However, we've now utilised the reserves for this year at our partners' request, given what I said about embedding improvement, change and action planning for organisations. So this now is no longer a choice for us. It's no longer a choice not to request an uplift. So this year we have just requested an uplift. Next slide, please. The 23-24 funding contributions from our partners is represented here. The total at the bottom is how much we have every year for running the board and everything I've described to you. As you can see, it isn't a king's ransom. I would point out there is a big disparity between how much adult safeguarding board receives compared to how much the children's board receives. And for the first time this year, I've actually asked for the figures. So we have that as that be presented next year, I guess. But if you want those figures, I do have them. So we make a little bit of training income. That money isn't us selling things. We don't sell. We're not allowed to sell, obviously. What we do is we charge them if they don't turn up. Okay, so that's where we get the money from for that. But a bit of an innovative streak to give us a couple of grand. You can tell I worked in business for a while, can't you? So slide 17, next slide, please. So this is to let you know that the highest level of substantiated cases that we see, and this is now substantiated cases from adult social care's inquiries that they conduct, are largely from neglect, followed by self-neglect and then physical and financial abuse. That's no surprise to me. And it's also a reflection of the national picture, and it has been for several years. Next slide, please. So you'll be pleased to know I've reached the end. I wasn't sure if I was going to. Sorry?
You got there.
I got there, yeah. So we've just published, as you know, our 24-27 strategic priorities for where we go. We've kept it simple. We've just got three: prevention and quality and learning. We need to do those three things. We kept the same three from the previous years because the partners voted that they felt they were succinct, necessary and vital. And what we've done is we've reviewed the business plan, we've reviewed the objectives. We have a very detailed business plan, which is now performance monitored and the ability to be RAG rated. And also, as I've said, sets down the integration with the subcommittees for their delivery plans. So just to let you know for the future, so what are we planning on now? Right, well, we've looked at all the outcomes from the work we've done, from the outcomes the partnership have done. We've seen where we believe the gaps are. We can't do everything, but we're going to try, and we've now created around these three areas the following issues. So we want to see more co-production in our frameworks to enhance lived experience for safeguarding practice. We're working really closely with Health Watch on that. But I'm not going to report too much on this because this will be my report for next year. Increased audit and increase the ability to measure deliverables. Continue close working with all of the boards that are out there, which if they're not on my list, it's SECDAB, Essex Strategic Hate Crime Prevention Group, Suffolk and North Essex, Herts and West and South and North East Essex ICBs, Essex Community Safety Network, the Suicide Prevention Board, Safer Essex, Health and Wellbeing, Children's Arrangements and LEADER. We want to aim to increase awareness from seldom heard communities, rural communities in Essex, and also communities in relation to the ethnicity of the predominant case referral being white people. We want to change that. Or challenge it. We want to test the embedding of learning in organisational action and improvement plans in organisations which I've said we've addressed. We want to deploy utilisation of partner data in the police and the NHS, and we want to use that to identify themes and trends. We would like to enable appropriate SAR referrals. From the SAR referrals we receive, around half of them are not appropriate. And we're going to focus on self-neglect, professional curiosity, legal literacy and carer stress. And we're in the process of reviewing our coroner's protocol, so how we work with the coroner's courts. And that's it.
Well, thank you. You can draw breath now.
Thank you.
Have we taken the
Well, it was worth a shot, and we've got the report. The details of the things that I've talked about are all in that report.
I think it's really good to have such a complete and full report from you. It's really incredibly helpful.
Thank you.
So I don't know whether we've got any questions. You indicating? Sorry, I thought you were.
All of us.
I am, yes. I don't know what order you want to take them in, but
well, you were the first one I saw, so I'll go for you first.
Thank you. I'm a new member to this committee, so I'm bound to say I'm pretty blown away with the breadth of work that you have to cover and that you've achieved. So, I mean, well done to everybody who's involved in that. I've just got several questions on the achievements. I wonder if you could just elaborate on them. First one, the rough sleeping initiative. I'm interested in that. I'm a Chelmsford member. We do have a problem here in Chelmsford. No sooner do we find places for these people, more peer, station, and find a place in the high street or somewhere. It's just an ongoing problem. So I wonder if you could just elaborate on the work and how that initiative is going, please.
I can to a degree, but that's fallen into this reporting year. So we didn't start that when we commenced the initiative from the government letters, a ministerial letter that came out to all safeguarding adult boards across the country that said what we had to do in relation to joining, if you like, more collaborative work with homelessness and rough sleeping. And we didn't have that member on our board, and we thought that was a vital thing to do. So the start of that work has been that we've engaged with that person, we've met with that person, and we've had a meeting initially with the chief executive rep of the boroughs and district and city councils. So that's as far as we've got. However, that work is going on in this year now, in relation to the combined approach between those people, so that will be fed back now to us, because what was missing from the board, in my opinion, which I think it was a good edict to get from the government, was what was missing was that feedback in relation to homelessness, the initiatives, what was happening, what did the regional picture look like, what did the Essex picture look like? We didn't have that picture. So this has made that happen now. So your question is valuable, but it's a bit premature because we've only just started that work. So I might be able to answer that better at this point next year.
Can I just come in on that one? It has just been announced, and I know work is taking place, that there's a project being directed at Essex on this very issue from central government. So there's work going on with the committee, the board member, in actually how it's going to look going forward. It's a couple of programmes that have come out, and it was only just announced this week. So hopefully we'll get more of that information ready for the next annual report.
Okay, thank you. Well, to some extent, places where they almost become a victim of their own success, because it becomes known. Well, go to Chelmsford, you know, you'll find a place. They come from London, and it's just never ending. So anyway, I'm pleased that's being picked up. Mention there of HMP Chelmsford. I wonder how the early release scheme affected you, because obviously that was almost sprung on all the various agencies. I mean, were you able to cope with that?
So the early release scheme, again, that's fallen into this year's reporting. So as I say, I always have to report a year behind. So the early release scheme is 24 and will be 24-25, but I can comment on it, which is that obviously the National Probation Service are managing that. They will give us what those figures were going to look like, so that we could share that with our partners. And everybody could try as much as they could to be prepared. So that's one of an example of a distinct advantage of working together in this level of partnership. So we were able to analyse those figures. We were able to see what the numbers were like, what crimes we were looking at, previous level of risk of that prisoner, managed by the probation service, and they advised us accordingly. So each partner was able to actually see what might affect them. So we had some warning of it, and we continue to do so. Sorry, I'm just being passed a note by my colleague. Yeah, okay, thank you. So in relation to Chelmsford Prison, as I said in the report, we had some concerns. I had some concerns in the reporting year, because they have, I think it's what I'm going to say now. I hope some of the answers to these questions aren't public before I speak.
We are live streaming, so maybe you want to provide them separately. That would.
Okay.
I think for security reasons, you should provide them separately.
Okay, I'll provide an answer to that separately in relation to the prison itself. Okay, but we have received assurance from the prison that that strengths are in place, and their attendance aboard is back on track for next year.
Okay, thank you.
Say it like that.
And also, you mentioned you visited the Linden Centre. I just wonder, is there anything that you'd like to share from your visit?
Chairman, can I just make the comment that we are, as Essex County Council, a core participant in the inquiry. So therefore, we would have to go into a part. We were going to have a discussion on that and be very, very careful on who we bring into that conversation. However, any inquiry about the Linden Centre, you could take directly to the Lampard inquiry. You can answer that.
Okay.
It also falls into next year's reporting because the visits to Linden Centre were planned in 23-24, but they took place in 24-25. So it's actually my next year's reporting on my feedback from this visits, if that's okay.
The other thing, I didn't hear any mention of working with schools. I mean, I'm involved with some local schools, and you know, when they have some concerns, the youngster, they make contact with the appropriate feed in children's services. So is that how it works through children?
Well, it works through children's services,
Yes.
where we represent adults.
Yes.
So from
sorry.
18 onwards.
Sorry.
That's why I didn't mention schools.
I beg your pardon.
It's all right. There are other concerns and issues we've considered as a board in the past in relation to young people. So particularly around universities, mental health, for example, of students. However, I have to say that it's always a question of what the priority is and where the learning's coming from. So at the moment, our priorities are very distinctively based on the learning that we have gained from all of the analytical work that we've done, which are the key 5 topics I mentioned earlier around self-neglect, professional curiosity and legal literacy. There's probably another one I've left out. But our issues do not really rest with schools.
I see.
If I can just add,
sure.
just for assurance for committee's purposes, so all health agencies attend the Essex Safeguarding Children's Board, where there are robust conversations around children in schools, and obviously education is represented as well as the local authority. So there is multi-partner agency working for children within the education space, and Natalie and myself, colleagues, so we attend both boards. So if there is anything that would be a transition through to the adults board, we'd of course inform the chair.
Okay, thank you. And finally, Chairman, the funding contributions, is that a statutory requirement of local authorities?
It's a very interesting question. There's a statutory requirement on each of the partners, the statutory partners, so the NHS, the police and Essex County Council in this case. There's a statutory requirement on each of those partners to contribute to the production of the life of, the being of a safeguarding adults board. There's a statutory requirement under the Care Act 2014. How much they contribute is not written anywhere.
Oh, I see. I'm just worried about any future financial pressures on yourselves.
We
pressures on the districts and city and boroughs.
And you know, we're not alone. We're all living with massive financial pressures.
Yes.
We're no different than any of our partners, and we feel for them as much as they feel for us. So we do what we can with what we have, and we probably go the extra mile, I think. We're a very committed group of people.
I'm sure, yes.
A key difference in the funding between the Children's Board and the Adults Board is it's written in their working together constitution that they have tripart funding, so their funding is the same for all statutory agencies. That's not in our Care Act requirements.
I think it was a missed opportunity, quite honestly.
Yes.
But then I could probably write a small book on the missed opportunities in that act, so I better shut up.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. This might be another missed opportunity. I just wanted to firstly ask, you mentioned that there was some attendance issues with board members. Do you have any powers as a board to ensure that attendance is as it should be? So I'd just like to hear a bit more about that. And then this is a bit more general, probably a comment rather than a question. It's still very early days, but it just came to me in the presentation that it might be something that the board has already been mindful of or needs to consider it with the Parliament moving forward with assisted dying, whether that's going to be an issue in the future.
I was waiting for that one.
Yes,
Thank you.
That's been raised before, I think, by my colleague over there. Okay, so powers. We have some powers, but not in relation to attendance.
Yeah.
So the powers that we have are set out in the Care Act. So one of our powers, for example, is what's called Section 45. And that means that if, and this is an interesting one, it's like all aspects of law, I think I've come to learn over the years. It's not what it says, it's how you apply it. And keeping within the boundaries and the constraints and the opportunities that that particular statement says, and being able to defend that in court, ultimately. So we have a Section 45 power, which gives me, effectively, the ability to ensure that people cooperate in relation to safeguarding information that's required. So I suppose I've never actually ever done it. I've done Section 45 with providers. So, for example, we mentioned in the presentation around we've got several horrendous cases at the moment of sexual abuse in care homes. Okay. So, for example, one of those particular situations, a particular provider was not responding to our requests for information. And so, you go through the normal process of asking nicely, and then you go through the telephones, then you go through the letters, and then the escalation, if you like, can come to a Section 45 power. And the Section 45 power is basically me instructing the chief executive of that organisation that they have to cooperate under the law. Failing in the Care Act, from my perspective, only personal, please don't upset the government by this being live streamed, Deborah Stewart Angus, is that there's nothing to police that. There's no Section 45 crew that are going to come along. However, we do have now CQC regulatory systems back in place, and I'm sure that most chief executives wouldn't wish for that to be reported to CQC. So that's one power. That doesn't give me the power to make somebody walk up the path and walk in the room and join a meeting like this. So what I do is I will always use my personal influence. I make relationships with people. Say, in 11 years of chairing, it's worked.
Thank you. And then the second point, if you do.
Second point was assisted dying. Of course, it's going to bring debate and issues to our board. At the moment, I mean, Councillor, Stamp, sorry, I can see Wendy, but
just call me Wendy, it's fine.
Wendy asked me this question a while ago and asked if we'd been consulted or if national boards had been consulted on this matter, and the answer is no, we haven't. Nobody said a sausage to us, which is an interesting one because I'm part of. We have something called the National Executive Team, who are a group of 12 chairs across the England, and I'm in that team. So normally we get asked at national level regular questions, particularly by the DH, but nothing's come to us on that. I'm expecting it to in due course. I think it's very new. I'm sure that when it does come, it will bring a big debate at board level.
Yeah, thank you.
Link back to the attendance, what I would like to say is that of the statutory partners that are in front of you, they all have 100% attendance at the board meetings and the exec meetings. And if these people can't come, there is always a deputy. I won't say the lack of attendance, it's the wrong word, where attendance doesn't happen or a deputy doesn't come, it's more third sector, the providers that come just because of the amount of meetings they've been invited to. But we do monitor it on a yearly basis, and we do note it if it gets to a certain level, and we just give them a gentle email, shall we say, just to let them know that it's dropped.
I presume the bruising clears fairly.
I hope so. It comes from me, so I'm very nice because I want to speak to them a lot.
I mean, just a comment from me, I think on that issue of the assisted dying bill, my perception is that it would be really important if Parliament in their next iterations of that started to take advice from interested bodies who will have to fall out.
You're right.
So
We will have to deal with the fallout. That's a very good point.
yeah, so I think.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Like Councillor McCrory, I'm new to this committee, so apologies if I'm going to ask a couple of questions that you've already addressed to previous meetings. Right at the very beginning, you mentioned that the report was based on the year ending April 23.
Sorry, April 24. March 24.
Yeah,
So it's 23, 24.
23, 24.
Yeah, you said 23. I thought you said year ending 23. In that case, that part of the question is irrelevant.
Yeah, no, we're not. We're only a year behind.
Me too.
You mentioned about transitional safeguarding, and I've got the slide on my laptop showing the ages of the people that you're involved in protecting. And I think many of us would be surprised by how many are teenagers, early 20s. And I have had some professional dealings with some people in that category many years ago. And I'm really concerned by the apparent lack of support that those young people get, particularly when they're coming out of care. Effectively, your 18th birthday, there's the door, get out, look after yourself. So I'd be interested in any actions that you take or support that you offer that would assist those young people. I have a second question as well, which is unrelated to that. In the past, I've had to care for a couple of people, close relatives, and I can understand why there is support for the assisted dying bill. I actually oppose it, but I can understand why there is support. And you mentioned a tragic case that involved firearms, and I think this possibly is directed to, sorry, I've forgotten what your rank was, but it's fine. And if I was in the position of helping somebody to an assisted death, I don't have access to a firearm. I do have access to drugs. I do have access to knives. You can smother somebody very easily. I'd like your thoughts on how you protect people against those other means. And I'm not necessarily talking about illegal drugs, but my first wife was on morphine, for example, for a long while. I know that you could use that.
It's a very hard question.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think for the second part, I think you're asking how we're preventing people effectively from being murdered. And my observation would be there's a huge amount of stuff we're doing in the domestic space around homicide prevention. We have cohorts to identify those most at risk, both perpetrators and victims. We have domestic abuse problem solving teams that are specifically targeting those perpetrators and supporting those individuals. And we're using data, and we're using partners' data, and we're using partnership relationships to identify those people most at risk. I don't really know that I can kind of talk further than that. I know Natalie wants to come in as well.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. I think it is complex, and I'm not saying that it's always preventable all the time, but if there's specifically, and I think it was picked up in Penny's case, we heard from the family the need for it to be coordinated, but we also know that healthcare practitioners are going in and, in essence, assessing the family, assessing the well-being, and assessing the resilience as well. Now, that's not to say it's to the point of detective, but again, the curious questions. That's why there's so much emphasis on professional curiosity, as well as challenge positions between all agencies as well. So what we have to be is, one, curious. We also have to be very comfortable with challenging each other's positions and decision makings. And the more we foster that, the more that we can actually allow ourselves to wrap around a family and, in essence, see the early warning signs or be curious enough to probe deeper and further.
The question you raised goes a step further, actually. In my view, having been a practitioner in this for many years in my past, that question also goes as far as if you enter a person's property by invitation, and you ask to see a person in that property and the person doesn't want to see you, but they're in a bedroom upstairs. What do you do? And this is why Natalie's reference to professional curiosity. There's cases across the country where professional curiosity is the only thing that gets you in the door and gets you through that door. And I say, when I train practitioners, I regularly say, you need to know what's on the other side. And it's the hardest thing if you haven't got permission to be there. It's about you talking your way to enable the person to feel safe enough to talk to you. So the question you raised is an interesting one, but it has ramifications in all directions, and also in relation to practitioners' legal powers, which are not perhaps as strong as they used to be, reduced rather than increased.
On the transitional safeguarding.
Oh, sorry. We sort of got sidetracked with the second part, didn't we? So transitional safeguarding, there was a real gap in this space, and as a result of that, we've set up a multi-agency transitional enablement group. We've got really good buy-in from key statutory partners, which includes health partners, police, EPA, who else? Probation, adult social care, children's social care. We all come together every month, and the people that we're talking about in this cohort particularly are those aged 18 to 25 who may not have eligible needs under the Care Act, but by token of their experiences, childhood traumas, the way they've grown up and the experiences they've had, they often are really, really vulnerable to abuse and exploitation. Where the risks are really high, we have a referral process in to our team. Mainly they come through from children's social care, if I'm honest. And we talk as a multi-agency group about who in the room, who in the partnership could provide some support and guidance. We have the Children's Society actually in that space. And we've had some really good outcomes for some of our young people that come through that space. Because they're 18, they do have to consent to being supported by the group. If they don't consent, we can't hear them. It's a bit like with Prevent and Channel Panel. We can hear somebody's situation, but if they don't consent to work with us, we are stuck. So that's quite difficult. But I think we're going from strength to strength in that group. We've been running for about 18 months. We've had about 28, 29 referrals now. And that's a continuous piece of work and a monthly piece of work. We follow up, we have extraordinary meetings if there's a particular difficult situation or something that's really urgent that can't wait for that monthly cycle as well. So we are working quite hard to try and improve that for young people.
Welcome news.
What I will say as well, one of the key aims of the project officer that we've just employed is to strengthen that transitions and that whole family approach. So it's like a next step, although it's going from strength to strength, we just want to make sure it's going to stay that way and maybe look at them non-traditional aspects of transitional safeguarding versus the traditional somebody who has an LD who needs that service carrying on. So it's the combination of the two, but that's what the project officer has been, or one of the aspects of why the project officer has been brought in, to just strengthen it even more than it has done over the last year.
Kind of looking at research and ways that we can improve. We also have in adult social care a working together group, which is multi-agency again, and looks at people with perhaps autism or really low-level learning disabilities, again, that don't really meet the eligibility criteria for adult social care support. They meet and talk about those lower-level risks and ways that they can help support it.
Thank you. I'm not normally here either, but I'm not new. I was here for 3 years. not for 5 years. So I think I left this committee probably as you were starting your role, and we were in an informal chat yesterday, sort of another pre-meet that didn't involve you. And I remarked, and the chairman and Harlow said that I should bring this up in the meeting, so I'm going to. I've made loads of notes as you've been talking today, and there were notes that were already in my head about the radical shift and the radical change in the quality of these meetings with safeguarding. It was the one subject that people and families carried out before that I used to dread because it was just dull. And actually we've been given an enormous amount of information, and it's engaging, it's collaborative, it's professional. I can look at it and see what it's actually telling me. The style, all of it is just incredible. So Deborah, if that is you that's brought about these changes, give yourself a huge pat on the back, because it's an enormous day and night difference to what I last saw on a safeguarding presentation 5 years ago when I was on this committee. I particularly like the collaboration and the integrated system, so you'll be able to share information, which we were talking earlier on about, not having to tell the same story 4 times, you get the one thing done. So I particularly like aspects of that. I really love the detail in the report on how you're talking about who you're working with and what your ambitions. These subcommittees, I think, are fantastic, and it's really obvious from an annual report basis of what you're doing, what you're about, and where you're intending to go with it. I found it really depressing to read that 2/3 of all safeguarding concerns were for adults over the age of 65, given the population demographic of this county. And even more depressing that more of those were females, given that we're just coming out of 16 days of action under the white ribbon. You know, it's quite a depressing statistic. I did have a question. You brought Tier 4 beds into it.
Could you say that a bit louder for me?
Tier 4 beds.
Tier 4.
Into the conversation earlier. I don't know if you were able to expand on why we think perhaps there's a significant drop in the availability of those beds across the country, and what we're able to do about that. And I know I've seen figures for all 3 of the ICBs. You've already answered so many of the questions. I was going to do the whole who's paying thing. You've elaborated on that. So maybe if at the end of all of that, you could maybe elaborate on, right, how much do you need? What needs to change? So if you had it one shot to make your punt on a public meeting videoed and recorded, what does Deborah need? And has Deborah thought of finding those partners and board members that don't come in the same way as you find the people who don't attend your training? That'll be it for now. Thank you.
Thank you for that wonderful feedback, Councillor Henry. And I'm not going to take all the glory because I have this team, and we are one. It hasn't always been like this. It's like this now. It's been like this probably for about the last, I think, probably 18 months, 2 years. We've really worked at it. So yeah, meet my work family. So that's thank you for the recognition and acknowledgement of that, because those things don't come overnight. And it's been welcomed what you've said. If Deborah Stewart Angus had one shot, did you say, at something, one wish? I know what it'd be, but I don't think I'm ever going to get it. And this is just a personal point of view from myself. This isn't representing anybody here today, in case I completely say the wrong thing, everybody, and upset the world. But I just wish we were given the same recognition that children's have. Because to me, there is no difference. We are all human beings. Those children grow up. Elderly people, as you see, are at high risk in this county. And they're at the end of their lives frequently, with untold difficulties. And the fact that our figures for abuse of that particular group of people are there isn't good news. So that would be my wish. If there was the ability to make us more viable than we are, I think, if I'm honest, I'm going to say to you as a team today, we want value for money from us. a huge amount of value for money from us. Who knows what we could do if there was a little bit more? Where could we take this? How strong could we become? This partnership could only gain, and it could only gain in strength. But as I say, we take what we have, and we're grateful, quite honestly, in the circumstances that people are currently financially stressed.
Can I flip that question on its head? So
Say that again, sorry, I'm deaf in one ear.
Flip that question on its head.
Yeah.
We talked about what in an ideal world would do it.
Yeah.
What's the consequences of that not happening? Because obviously you've got pressures,
It's the pressures on the partners, the people that are here today. I am fully aware of the challenges they face. I've probably had, except with exception of the police, I've probably had everybody else's job here at some point in my life, because I'm an old woman now. Except maths. But I did train the murder team for the Met some years ago. So I understand their challenges. Every one of us here is faced with that pressure, and I mean NHS in the triple lock situation. And as much as we are compassionate to others, we are compassionate to each other, and we have to be. So I do push for change. I did a great one yesterday, and I said to people at a meeting, I'm expecting an answer on something in 2 weeks, and everybody sort of went, ugh. But I did to Giles, so that was me just being a bit of a chopsy chancer, really, because the answer was 2 weeks on a money decision. So what I'm really saying in that kind of message is I'm not going to mess around with this. And everybody took it very seriously and said, well, we might not meet 2 weeks, but what we will do is we will take this request to the relevant places as soon as possible, and we'll have an answer for you, such and such a date. And I was like, that was actually the outcome I wanted. So I don't think that I'm going to get what I suggested because of the cultural history of children's services always getting more money than adults, and B, the pressure people are under. And I think that we've all developed, and we all probably now do recognise that there should be equality between the two levels of need, if you like, between children and adults. However, we are in very different financial times. And perhaps we've recognised it too late. Perhaps we missed the boat with the apple boxes on it.
Thank you.
Just come back about the safeguarding and the older people.
Tier 4.
Sorry.
Sorry, tier 4. Sorry, I didn't answer tier 4. I do apologise. I got really bought into when you were talking to me. You got me there.
So just on tier 4, I appreciate there is a challenge, and you're speaking about capacity in tier 4. I do want to give that kind of statement out there that tier 4 is under NHS Specialist Commissioning. It is operated nationally, so access into tier 4 beds is operated through a national approach. I am going to speak for the children and what's important for our children in the community, and it's not always a tier 4 bed. So I'd like to shift attention to tier 3, which is the community support, and the importance of that being really strongly integrated alongside social care, alongside where necessary, police promotion, and importantly, the think family approach as well. And with that said, because the reason being is if we see tier 4 as our only solution, then our children are likely to be, one, stigmatised, labelled, have high level intervention that isn't necessarily as promoting to their recovery within society. And it seems to be a repeating access that happens for tier 4 children. So I really think our attention should go into that space of supporting families, communities, and the resilience within those.
And if I may add from what Natalie said, although incredibly eloquent, and I hope I do justice, for the children and young people who do not meet diagnosis, are sometimes those children of greatest risk with emotional dysregulation and lack of boundary, which then involves multi-agency involvement. And it's those children that we really need to focus on. So some of the work within Essex Safeguarding Children's Board, and this will be a set approach, will be to look at what is the wraparound that we need to do for these family units, however they may look, in order for those children and young people to feel heard, to feel safe, and to be able to progress and live their best lives. Tier 4 is sometimes a misnomer in terms of capacity. They are not the most conducive environments for children and young people to thrive in. And as well, we need to add the complexity of neurodiversity and neurodivergence in that space. So there is an overlap between mental health and neurodiversity and divergence, but we need to push it. We need to really do that left shift piece of work to really see the change in our society.
Just wanted to come back on females over 65 in safeguarding, or the amount of safeguarding referrals that we have. Often these are people that are in care settings and not living in their own home. So our highest referral rate for safeguarding concerns raised is from care providers. So, and it's always under neglects and acts of omission, which is our highest referral reason as well. We saw that in the slides. So often it's, what we find is that care providers will raise a lot of things to us because they feel they have to. They want to notify us that a one-off incident has happened. They're often no harm situations. So it looks really worrying, and it is really worrying. All safeguarding is worrying, but often a safeguarding response isn't required. It's more of a notification to let us know that a one-off incident has occurred in a care setting. And as a result of that, we're going to be doing some work in adult social care with Essex Care Association, which has about 400 members, and we're going to look at different pathways to let us know when something that has happened that doesn't warrant a safeguarding response, but still needs to be reported, so that they're in keep and doing the right thing by CQC.
So a good chunk of this would be picked up by, I think it's SCRG, is it? Our own safeguarding?
SCRG, yes, Serious Concerns Review.
Been reviewed and...
Yeah, where we have that, that's more about where we have significant risk with providers, and that we're really worried about the care delivery, whether it's quality or safeguarding or both, as it often is. That group meets weekly, sorry, not monthly. They meet weekly. There are actions set in relation to all of those providers that sit on the Safeguarding Concerns Review Group, Serious Concerns Review Group.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you. I was lucky enough to be on your last presentation, because I've been on this committee since I was successfully elected, and I'd like to congratulate you on the amount of work that you have done since the year last time you did the presentation. The multi-agency collaboration now is, there's more people sitting at that top table this year than there was at the last time. So, and the amount of work and the subcommittee, which is what my colleague actually raised, is incredible. And I think everybody needs to thank all of you, because it is a hard job and it's underfunded. So we need to, I don't know if we, because we set policy, if we could recommend that the additional funding or this discussion made behind the scenes or from this committee.
I think I've already made
you've done that, have you?
a mental note to put that in our roundup.
All right, so I'll leave that to the chairman.
I think that's something that has come out strongly, that you need additional support, and where we can, and I'm sure I include the rest of the members here to say that we need to be batting for your cause as well.
So I'll leave that to you, but can I ask my questions now?
Yes, certainly.
I think that's the question. Yeah, that was that statement. I've got three small questions really. I'm really interested in the specialist eating disorder services that you raised, and also because that often can start at a younger age. And I'm interested in the stats, because years and years ago it was generally females, and I think that's most probably changed. So have you got the data, so the comparison to males and females? And if it is started at a younger age, are there any, say for example, they have an eating disorder, whoever it is, and they feel as though whoever it is has managed to, what's the word, manage it, I think is the best way. Is there any evidence that when, depending on what eating disorder it is, because there's many forms of an eating disorder, it's not, you know, so does that eating disorder come back at a later stage in their lives? And is it triggered by any data or anything you've actually got? Because it could be, well, I'll ask that question. So that I'd like to know that. The second one is, I was very interested about how you're going to reach rural communities. I'm a member of a rural community and I champion all the time about the lack of involvement in rural communities, and we have definitely an ageing population, and women in isolation, widows. So it'd be interesting how you're going to be able to achieve that. The next point really is about dementia. I think everybody in this room has most probably been affected by somebody or people with dementia. And I take on board your comment about, and I'll use personal experience, my mum's now in the care home, my dad died of it. So my mum would not allow anybody into the house. And she would hide the key. In fact, we couldn't even get in, and she was bright enough to put the key in the door so you couldn't get in. The police would have to be called, and it was an absolute nightmare. So it's very, very challenging in different circumstances to be able to do that. But then you've also got the issues that there's a fall. They're laid on the floor for 5 hours. Who's going to get in? Who's going to help them? So how are you managing to deal with that, if you are? Because that is a massive, massive problem in our society now. And I think that's it. If you can't answer that, then that's absolutely fine. But I think it's something, well, no, it's serious, because, I mean, when we met with the team before, and I will, forgive me for coming back, Deborah, before you was going to speak, we met with the team and we had the social workers or whoever who wanted my mum to stay in the home because they felt it was better for her. We knew it wasn't, and we had a massive problem to try and get the report to agree that my mother went into a home. So there is a challenge there when you're dealing with authorities who don't listen to, there's 3 of us, there's 3 daughters, and I'm the strongest one, I should say, which you're not surprised about. But we found that very challenging. So how on earth can you, if you've got somebody who says your mother isn't going to go into home because we want her to be looked after there? And I do think that is an area that maybe could be listened to, maybe more. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Excuse me 1 minute. So can you pick up eating disorder question?
And I can do the discharge question.
And also dementia support teams. Can you pick up, thank you, not okay. Can you pick up something? Yeah. A little bit on some of the rural communities. I'm sorry. And I'll pick up something on some of the professional curiosity around dementia. Okay, we've got a plan.
Thank you. Sorry, we could have warned you.
If I start, I think I'll be very brief around eating disorder, but and certainly can't provide you the detail or the statistics on it. I'd be doing subject matter experts a great injustice if I had a go. But what I can say is that eating disorders, or indeed disordered eating, is an area, and I hate to use this phrase, but a growth area in our society. So you're probably very much picking that up. And I think we need to look at the complexity of this. And as much as, Deborah has kind of advocated for adults, this is where the importance of looking to our children, seeing what is forecasting coming to us, not only in transition, but in adulthood, is also part of our professional curiosity and indeed our approach. I think we've seen a growth in disordered eating. Some of it has been aligned to the numbers of increasing the autistic spectrum disorder and associations alongside that. Some of it is related to a pandemic effect as well, and some of it is related to general mental health distress within our children, all of which we are known has gotten increasingly worse, and probably a driver to this is the social media age. So I think it's quite right to put our attention to our children and how they are presenting. Hence the fact I think we have to be very cautious about tier 4 access and seeing that only as a solution. We need our communities and our societies and our schools and our families to be enabled to manage this. And eating disorder, you may recover, in your youth, because early intervention and the right level of support and psychology and family working may happen, but you may be triggered back into it as life circumstances come and hit you. So we've got to be aware of, I'm not saying it's a long-term condition, what I'm saying is it might mean that you step back into it. So that's as much I would give about that. Dementia support teams. I think all of us can agree that we've been hugely assisted by technology of late. And the innovation that is, I think, yet to come further in technology would let us use issues such as Alexa or Google or that one to be a connection into the home. But also we can get smart readers that can alert so that we know when somebody's put the kettle on, the radio on, the TV, or that the heating is switched on. These are really important to sustain the well-being of somebody within their community for as long as possible. I also am going to put a hand out to our clinicians who actually tackle those challenges every day. And sometimes the act of kindness, the getting to know the neighbours, getting to wrap around the family means that our clinicians can do the job for the person at the end of the day. Not denying it isn't difficult.
And so if I seem to be following on from that, which is fine, we've worked together a long time. I think just in relation to certain sub-communities regarding eating disorders and disordered eating. So I've had the privilege of being the Deputy Senior Responsible Officer for Health for the Learning Disability Health Equalities Board, which is a multi-agency board. One of the areas of absolute focus, of course, is restricted food intake disorder, so RFID. That is absolutely an area of focus that we are looking at with our colleagues in EPUT, with their eating disorder service, and also as well with the provider collaborative that also are responsible for the delivery of specialised eating disorder services, particularly for children and young people. From a health inequalities perspective, we absolutely need to think about those communities that we do not see. So we do know that the predominance of those individuals who are accessing services come from a white Caucasian background. We do know that there is disordered eating and eating disorder, particularly in Southeast Asian communities, but actually the access of those communities into services is far less. This is a piece of work that we absolutely need to focus on. It's not just an Essex issue, it is a national issue. So there is an awful lot of work in that space. So it's just to provide committee with assurance, we've got a long way to go, but we are aware of where the gaps in service are. And obviously hearing your experience as a relative with decisions being made about discharge, my response from a Mid and South Essex perspective is we are working incredibly closely around discharge pathways to ensure that families and patients are front and centre in terms of that decision making. I think during the pandemic, I think there were some quite directive decisions around ultimate location of discharge, just purely for expediency. We are still in that recovery phase of thinking actually that's not the way that we should have been doing things, and who should really be involved in the decision making, and particularly around in those for those older individuals with a dementia or some kind of cognitive impairment. Despite that, it is still important that we take the effort to understand for them where they consider to be a safe place to be discharged to, as well as listening to those families. So certainly within our ICB, it's a piece of work that we're absolutely focused on changing those pathways for discharge so that all voices are heard.
Can I just make it for the record? This is not from here, it's from up North Authority. I don't want anybody to think it's Essex, it's from the north.
Can I just add something there? I think you asked about gender with eating disorder. I think there is an increase in males presenting with disordered eating and eating disorders, and whether that's related to the body image that young men are going through at the moment is different, but there is an increase. I don't have the stats either, I'm afraid.
Thank you.
If I may, a quick bit on dementia from us. Obviously, the technology you've alluded to, we're working closely with health and social care. We're able to use GPS devices in set geofencing areas. So if people do, should we say, go for a wander but step outside those areas, an alert can be sent and we can locate them quickly so they don't become a significant high-risk missing person, for example. There's a lot of stuff going on. We follow the Herbert protocol, allowing families to complete all the paperwork in advance that partners can have access to in the event of a missing episode. So there's a lot of stuff that's going on multi-agency in the background to try and keep people safe.
You do very well in Essex because there's always a reminder on Facebook or Twitter. And somebody goes missing and in the community, there's always something and there's always people looking out and generally the person's found.
Yeah, we're pretty good, but clearly what we're trying to do, particularly with the dementia, become exceptionally difficult to find people. So through the use of the technology and engagement with families, social care, the carers and people like that, then, you know, in fairness, they may not be where they should be, but we know where they are. Go and get them.
Yeah, they're safe. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I think we've done the round. I've got a couple of items that I want to make, but I was really impressed with some of the things that you're talking about in terms of developing people's understanding around this. And I know that your ability to do that is going to be constrained by finances, effectively. I was particularly interested in the point that you made about the fire service and getting DBS checks. And I say that because one of the other things that I do is that I'm call me a regional almoner for the professional body that I belong to. We've got a benevolent fund and we give help and support to people who. And I raised the point at one of the meetings about why, if we as almoners are visiting people, you know, often older people, and helping them with their finances, why we weren't DBS checked. And the response I got was, why do we need to do that? We all seem like decent chaps, don't we? Because, you know, they said the same in the police at one stage. So I'm really pleased that you're promoting that. But I was also interested in the comment you made about the Lucy Letby case, because this obviously the inquiry into that isn't completed yet. There is an awful lot to learn from that, and it's a lot about structures and management structures and things like that, rather than purely nursing parts to it. I say that because the son of a close friend of ours is very closely involved in that. It was one of the people right at the front of that. Just wondered how you feel some of that information can be used to the benefit of hopefully not letting the same things happen again, you know, whether it's DBS checks or whatever. There's a part to this that means you're sort of helping support the infrastructure around this on a preventative basis rather than on a reactive basis.
I can answer that. I mean, obviously the Lucy Letby situation is highly complex and, as you say, still ongoing. But one of the things in relation to the Countess of Chester Hospital report that came out, one of the things we did at board level, so it's like, what can we do at this level, strategic level, as you say, to support the infrastructure? So we sought assurance from all of the health providers on the fact that they had put into place a Speaking Up campaign, Freedom to Speak Up campaign, how that was working, what that looked like, because you're right in what you've just said. Obviously, it's not just about nursing. It's actually about the culture of the organisation. Well, that's what I believe it is. My experience in safeguarding for 45 years has taught me a lot. And one of the things it's taught me is that a culture of any institution or any organisation is very important, where staff also feel safe to talk. And if they don't feel, I'm not saying that we should all be, you know, telling tales on each other, but if there's a genuine professional concern, staff need to be able to feel they can raise that in a safe place, in a safe way. So Natalie, you might want to pick up on that, yeah?
Yeah, I will do. And, you know, certainly what Deborah said is very true, very at the front of our thinking on this. But both myself and Giles will actually look after our local maternity neonatal services agenda. And part of the system and process to provide assurance and to minimise risk and to do early detection of any of the issues that we're discussing here is first of all, the data and the intelligence has gone from there to there. You know, there is now a lot more intricacy and there's a lot more obligation to look at firstly mortality data as well as the learning culture of each of our maternity units and neonatal services. There is a greater emphasis on national scrutiny, regional scrutiny, ICB scrutiny and delivery at local services. So we're not just seeing maternity and neonatal services managed by the hospital per se. The oversight and assurance is layered right up into a national position. And that is why you've got individuals like myself and Giles chairing these boards out with the typical organisation so that we can look at the quality improvement, we can touch base on the culture, but we are forever being informed around data, metrics and measures. And that is the full package.
And I think if I may add, as well as obviously the Countess of Chester, I'm sure members will have been aware of Martha's rule, which, and having listened to Martha's mother on more than one occasion describe her experience in the hospital of where her voice was not heard and neither was that of Martha's, it is absolutely intrinsic as part of the assurance of services that we are hearing from and giving voice to patients and their relatives, and that they have means through which they are able to do that and able to raise concerns and feel safe to do that without detriment. Because we have to recognise, and I'm sure we've all been relatives, we've all been patients, that intrinsic fear of not saying something because you're worried about the care that you're going to be provided for. We have to shift the dial on that. We absolutely have to. And so our responsibility within the integrated care boards is to ensure those mechanisms are in place, and if not, why not, and to keep the attention and the scrutiny so that people are able to raise their concerns, whether they be members of staff or members of the public, and that is given equal validity and it is listened to and investigations are undertaken.
Can I just point out that Lisa, who's your equivalent to Giles and Natalie, is not here today, but she would be doing exactly the same. So it's not that Colchester Hospital would be any different, it'll be exactly the same.
If I can just mention as well, we've got the LADO role in adult social care, which is local authority designated officer. Differs from the children's role because the statute is different, so we are more limited. But we receive referrals and I regularly have conversations with all of our hospitals, with our care providers. Our police colleagues often come to us with a concern about a worker in the health and social care profession, and we take really careful decisions about what we do about those things and how we communicate with providers when things come our way in relation to concerns about practice. And that isn't to do with direct safeguarding, if you like, so it's more about when somebody's done something in their personal lives and there could be a transferable risk. We have to look at those situations really closely and carefully. And also we have good links with our DBS team in the police, who will ask us to review information when people are applying for roles in health and social care where they believe there's been a previous concern about practice or something in their lives. So there is quite a robust response collectively, again, as to how we manage concerns.
Yes. Well, and obviously it's broadening across the piece. Almost every organisation needs that support. It's the churches, it's everything, isn't it? It's a whole history associated with that. So I don't think I've got any more. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I just realised I didn't get one of my questions answered.
I've just realised that. I was just going to put my hand up and say, do you want me to come back?
Yes, please.
There's two things I'd like to come back to you on. So one is just a perspective around the dementia issue that you raised, and the other I'll brief you on some of the planning elements. I can't do them all because we've got a whole ton of them, but I'll give you some examples of the planning elements that we're looking at for reaching seldom heard groups. But first of all, just a brief mention on dementia. So I too have been in exceptionally personal circumstances in relation to my loved one. My mum died of dementia last year. And it's very different when you experience it as an individual than when you experience it as a professional. Obviously, it was the first time I'd experienced that. So I do understand your feelings. I just need to say that. One thing I noticed from that perspective, from a personal perspective, and from being a relative in a hospital, where your background or your knowledge is meaningless, you're just another person in that queue, was how much difficult questions were not raised with us, how many assumptions we had to make about the dying process. And so one of the things that we've picked up on and learning from SARS is exactly that. We've seen from some of the outcomes from the carer stress elements in cases. So today I've only given you obviously a tiny little brief. I mean, I could talk for England about this, as you could probably imagine. But one of the things that's come out of that elements around carer stress, particularly with dementia, is enabling the practitioner to ask those difficult questions. Because over the years, in fairness to practitioners, there has been a whole governmental initiative change from the idea of moving people into residential care to keeping people at home for independence. Now, realistically, having, as we said before, been a practitioner in many circumstances, there is a point where that has to be questioned. And the right thing for the individual, particularly if they've lost their capacity, has to be brought forward. And there has been definitely a trend to almost at times put residential care in the professional corner and say, well, we're going to keep the person at home as long as possible. Now, I understand the value of that. And when I don't know what research the government used to make those decisions at the time, but the figures that demonstrate when a person moves into residential care, the figures around depression, for example, there's been a lot of research done on depression when people move into residential care, and the figures on longevity of life. There's been a lot of research done on that, and it does have an impact. You can't say it doesn't. So I do understand the argument for having people as independent as possible for as long as possible in control of their own lives. However, as I say, there does come a point. So for me, in response to your question, it's about that professional curiosity thing that we said before. It's about enabling practitioners as well to, if you like, move with a degree of confidence within a family setup, which is very hard because you have to gain the trust and the confidence of that family. And that's about building relationships. And again, there is so much pressure on professionals at the front line. And figures have so increased. Cultures have changed. You know, my personal worry is what we're talking about here is the value of social work. We're talking about the value of good community-based social work and all of the principles of empowerment, rights, belief in people, compassion. That's what we're talking about, really. And having a professional enabled enough to feel in any family that they go into that they can ask those difficult questions and raise those difficult subjects and manage that appropriately and professionally. So that's why, part of the reason why we put a big focus on professional curiosity, because that goes back to this gentleman's question earlier about when I said, who's behind the door? Who's upstairs behind the door that you haven't seen, but you're in a circumstance where the family are telling you there's absolutely nothing wrong whatsoever, and you just need to go away and mind your own business. And you know, there's been countless cases where an individual actually hasn't been seen, or a child hasn't been seen, or the child has been seen and been decoyed. I could go on. So that's why that whole argument for me around this board picking up the value of that in practice is crucial. And it's also about valuing the community levels of practice and think family as a process and think family as a methodology, because we're all here in different professions, but one contact, you know, that the old adagio of, you know, make every contact count is really important. It should be from that one contact, so much learned for all of us that we can have early intervention is the other thing we're talking about, and planning with families. I mean, when I went through my personal experience, nobody planned a thing with me. I got given a DNAR document and told that was what was going to happen. I could go on. So I do understand the differences between a professional stance, a board like us, a strategic crew, but we do understand and we do feel. So that's just what I wanted to say about professional curiosity. In relation to your other question around the hard to reach groups or seldom heard groups, as we prefer to say, this is our whole plan. We've sent this in to you. You may not. You can resend it if you'd like to refresh. But this is a whole plan that sets out the detail of how we intend to reach the strategic success that we want. So in the priorities that I mentioned earlier, prevention, learning and quality. So this is written under those headings, but we have picked out the areas, as I mentioned earlier, that we're going to focus on. So one of those areas being seldom heard, hard to reach groups. So I'll just give you a couple of examples of this, because really the true answer to what you're asking me is set within this plan. So you asked me how we were going to do some of this stuff. Okay, so when we write these, when I write these, and Kayla helps me as well, try to think through, and we try to think through every aspect of how we are bringing together board analytics, the partners analytics, the partners metrics. So everything here is effectively evidence-based before it goes on paper. So if you asked us to demonstrate anything, we could say, yeah, there it is. You know, so we're not making this up. This isn't just blue sky thinking, but some blue sky thinking does help, as you can imagine. So for example, in our first objective for next year, which is technically now, so we've just started with this. We started it in, I think the first group, the first prevention committee met in May. So we are now 4 or 5 months into that. So that met in May to deliver this. They've been meeting all of the time, but this is about this year's delivery. So this year's delivery under the new strategy for 24-27, first example says, we will work with Health Watch and we will set up a new group, but we're not just going to set up any group. That's going to be a co-produced group with people from Health Watch that they recommend to working with us with their knowledge. So using their contacts, if you like, their abilities out there, to set up what we decide on mutual expectations, advise this group on that, and then come back from them with what these people think, because these are the experts pretty much, in my opinion, to advise that group. So direct infiltration, if you like, into knowledge and where these about how we're going to do this. Second thing, with that group, we're going to research and identify the relevant community groups that we wish to target. We can't target everyone. We just don't have the means to do that. So the other thing is, I feel as a chair, I can't be saying to the chairs of my groups, well, you're just going to do the flipping lot, because that's not achievable. I've got to give them, things that are achievable and make them feel that they can do this and that they will therefore be successful. So my mum always used to say to me when she was alive, how do you eat an elephant? And with the answers piece by piece, yeah. So I sort of live with that. So with that co-production group, so helping them and enabling them with this expertise here, and a lot wider as well from the whole board membership. Research and identify the relevant community groups and the organisations where we need to strengthen that engagement and what we need to put into place to make that happen. For example, contact and meet with 4 examples of these groups. So 4 under, so I'm giving them targets, I'm giving them performance targets effectively. 4 under each community-based organisations. We could, for example, talk about faith communities. We could talk about taxi communities. And 2 easy to reach organisations, for example, the university, for example, voluntary sector, and explain why we need to increase the engagement, because we've got to get those people on side. They're going to have to work with the whole, if you ask me, the magic trick, if you like, in my opinion. I'm going to say this on perhaps nationally now, give all my goodies away. But it's in a position when you don't have tons of money and you have only got the people belief, if you like, around you and their values and what they believe in. It's enabling those people to do it for you. So I can't delegate to anyone because I'm not a manager. I'm not a director. I used to be, and when I first came here, I quite missed it. I was like, because I was quite used to telling people what to do. But I can't do that here. I have to say, look, this is why we need to do it. Tell me what you think. Tell me how that's doable for you. Is that achievable? So it's a different approach than being a director of an organisation or a managing director or a chief executive, and I've done that too. So it's very much an enabling approach to partners to enable them to work with you. Now then, this next tier down is going to be us enabling the next crew down the line to say, well, this is why we need to do this. Are you willing to help us with that? Because we can't pay them to do it. So it's all on goodwill, and it's hard. It's not an easy task. Another example, arrange briefings in year 2 on the responsibilities that we have and the priorities that we're going to set to strengthen this closer working relationship, to document and analyse what we've got from feedback from these groups as safeguarding challenges. So an example, if, for example, we were going to target a particular community that had cultural issues in relation to not wishing to engage with safeguarding or professionals, and there's numerous communities where that's the case. So, you know, how are we actually going to do that on the ground? How do we get other groups to work for us? Another example, we're going to identify what those challenges are and recommend forward planning for year 2 based on the assessment of the achievement that we've reached in year 1. So we need to analyse how far we got in year 1. Did we identify those groups? Did we figure out what those issues were? How did we do it? So a small brief example, which Michaela passed me, which is brand new, which I didn't know, why she passed it to me, was so the first thing they've started with, the prevention group, because a lot of this sits with prevention. A lot of it's based on quality because it's about data metrics. And a lot of it's based on the Safeguarding Adult Review group as well, because we're getting that hot learning, if you like, from live cases out there where things have gone very wrong. So we can use all of those things to come up with these plans. So it starts, that whole process has been started with an engagement with Healthwatch to gain the agreement, for want of a better word. No fees involved. We're using the fact that Healthwatch are commissioned by Essex County Council anyway. So meet with them, have that conversation and see if they'll work with us. And they said, yes, of course we will. What do you want us to do? Thanks, great, ticking number 1 box, yeah? And that's how it sort of works. For me, that's how it sort of works. So this example that Michaela passed to me was that the group decided they were going to put a letter together, which, because the information at the moment around safeguarding, etc., is currently held in places like libraries, GP surgeries, stuff like that. And not everybody gets out. And not everybody, you know, sees these things, and not everybody picks up the leaflet, you know, short of doing a door drop, letterbox drop. So they've put together a set of questions for seldom heard groups to start the understanding of what we feel their needs are from what they tell us. So going to the people, if you like, and using a whole variety of mechanisms to do that, bearing in mind just that. I mean, I've run organisations, and so I know how you can do that in an organisation. Doing it with people that you're saying, please, will you do this for me? I'm very grateful. Thank you very much. You know, it's a completely different ballgame. So it's about really the belief that people have in the Safeguarding Partnership in Essex. And it's about the belief that the partners have, mainly, I feel here, about the fact that this is doable by these methods, because this is what we've been charged with. That's my job. So that's the start of a plan. If you wish us to send you this, another one, we can dish this out, can't we, to everyone again? And we'll send you the strategic document, which is very simple. That's only a few pages long, because I decided I wasn't going to dish out pages on that. The pages need to be the devil's in the detail in the business planning. The rest is just keep it simple. We're going to do this, this and this, and this is how we intend to do it. So that's then translated into the how, which is that. So if it's helpful, Wendy, I'll send you that. I hope that sort of answers your question. I know that was a long-winded answer, but it was a complicated question, and perhaps I was thinking when you were saying it, I thought, I'm sure you're not going to love the answer on this one, but...
No, because I hear the words all the time, we're going to do it, but you never heard the how.
Yeah.
And how are you going to do it? Because, you know, without going, like you said, when you said church or faith groups, then that's an area that we need to look into as well.
And faith leaders. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to say a big thank you to all of us, to all of you, for partly for all that you're doing and really the success that you're moving in all forward with. And I'm really impressed. I did think at one stage we had an earlier presentation about saving money, and I think you perhaps should have been giving some lessons in that.
Yeah, I could help. I could help with that.
But, thank you. It's really been incredibly helpful for the update, and I think I'd reiterate what Jeff said earlier on about how we've seen this just improve immeasurably over the
Thank you.
period. So
On behalf of everyone, thank you.
power to your elbows. And if there's anything that we can do to support your request for more money or anything like that, we'll certainly we'll make note of that, because these things do get read, and hopefully we can put some pressure on that basis.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the acknowledgement, the recognition. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for coming along today. Christmas to all.
Thank you.
Agenda.
123. If you click in there, you can just type in the page number. 123, we're going to.
Right. Well, thank you. Matters arising. We've got a few things coming up from previous meetings that we need to just run over. Anything for you to add on that? Yes.
Just as detailed in the appendix, we've had some updates on some matters arising, and I've also received a further update since the papers were published. So I will circulate that to everybody rather than read it out, because it includes quite a lot of data. Okay. And then we have the work programme next. So just to go through it, in January, we've got the children at home, children's education and missing education on the agenda.
I think that's interesting, because one of the things that, I mean, it's certainly come up in the dreadful news that we've seen on the media in the last couple of days about children being taken out of school unreasonably, and something that Peter's talked about a lot over the period. That links very strongly with this safeguarding issue. So I think that's an area that maybe we ought to have a look at. Never say that it wouldn't happen here, it could happen anywhere. So it's something that we should perhaps include within that discussion. And when we have our pre-meeting, I think we'll bring that up.
Yeah, so the other item on the agenda for January is the Children's Safeguarding Board annual report. So they both link in.
Yes, yes. So there's a real synergy between those two items.
And so we have a number of items that aren't currently scheduled. We're talking to officers to figure out when their timeline may best align with our remaining 3 meetings, or 2, I think, because the last one in April will probably be a roundup of all the work that committee's done over the past 4 years. So once we hear back from officers, I'll send around the proposal for the last 2 agendas for your agreement.
Joe, what we're going to do about the transformation thing we just heard?
Well, I think my suggestion, as I said earlier, I think we need to have an offline meeting. In the new year and establish the ground rules rather better than we have at the moment on that. So yeah, I mean, if we can set something up, sort of first thing in the new year. Not the 1st of January.
No.
I won't be here.
So, Chairman, I did mention in the private briefing about blue badges, and if we could roll that in somewhere, that'd be appreciated.
Yeah. I think that's it. I think we'll close the meeting at 2 minutes to 1.